We're good.
All set. I call to order this February 11th, 2025 Fairfield Plan and Zoning Commission meeting to order. Start with our meeting minutes from three meetings previously, January 28th, 2025, January 29th, 2025, and February 4th, 2025.
Alexis is not on, right, Emily?
No.
Okay, so you would need an alter, it would be Peter's turn.
Peter, you're Commissioner Collins, you're in as alternate.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Commissioner Harrison. 29th was our executive session, right?
Correct.
So I'd just say at the time and say now, that's litigation, but no motions were taken, no action was taken. May I have a motion for the meeting minutes? Corsillo,
Move to approve.
to approve from Commissioner Corsillo. Is there a second? Commissioner Collins seconds. Commissioner Corsillo,
Look good to me. Nothing further.
Commissioner Collins. Nothing for. Any other comments or questions from the commission?
I have a question about the Soundview Avenue one. This is Kathy Braun.
Go ahead.
I seem to recall the minutes say that, there's a condition that the town engineer work with the applicant to satisfy the questions raised in the neighbor's expert SLR. But I seem to recall us talking about a little more logistics. For example, there's three things I have. If substantial changes would take place as a result of that discussion, then that would trigger our commission to review it. So who decides if those are substantial changes? And also, I thought we discussed who retains and pays the expert, and also how will the expert or the people who retain him be notified that this conversation is taking place? Like, how will anyone know that this discussion between the town engineer and the applicant is taking place to try to satisfy the neighbor's expert's engineering report on the stormwater system? I thought we had just covered those items. I don't see them in the minutes. And I assume then they wouldn't be in the decision either. But I think those logistics are important. And I thought I remember discussing them. I don't have a transcript, but.
Go ahead, yeah.
I can, Kathy, this is Jim. I can try to address that. The first thing is that there were many of the neighbors were here and present when you guys discussed this, and they heard the discussion in what was articulated with respect to those conditions. We can't compel anybody to retain anybody. So the way we articulated that at the vote was any third party that may be retained shall be permitted to participate in the review. So we can't compel the neighbors to engage anybody, but if they do, then that engineer is certainly welcome to participate in that discussion. There is in the last sentence on condition number 1, it says, should the drainage revisions result in substantive changes to the building layout or parking access, such changes shall be subject to TPC commission review. That's going to be a judgment call on the staff's part. At some point, I mean, this could be imminent. It could be 3 years from now. That if the building footprint is going to change substantially, or the design of the building changes, then we would bring that back. But it's understood with this commission that there's going to be some changes to the drainage design. But if that drainage design triggers changes to how the building lays out, then we would bring that back.
So how would anyone be notified that these discussions are taking place? Should that be in here or in our decision? I thought how would anyone know? Like, are they already talking about it? Have they already resolved it? I mean, how will that be how will anyone be notified to know when to communicate, I guess?
Well, the requirement is that the applicant is on the applicant to redesign the drainage to the satisfaction of the town engineer. There's no onus on any of the neighbors here. Should they want to anything that gets submitted is public record. We can't compel them to participate.
Okay,
because I would think, Kathy and Commissioner Braun, my expectation would be because the applicant and the town attorney, as Mr. Wentz said, the onus is on the applicant. That person the applicant will engage the town attorney, the town engineer, excuse me. And it's gonna be based on at least the initial, who was the company, Redness?
Yeah, it's
So they're gonna
the
be-
issues that Redness and Mead raised are the issues that need to be resolved,
I
so.
mean, I would expect that they reach out to Redness and Mead, and go from there, but, that was the expectation.
Can we
Um,
put that in here that they should I'm sorry, I said SLR by mistake. It was Redness and Mead, and they've done work for the town before, so I assume they're in touch with the town on a regular basis, more or less.
that would be my expectation as well, but I mean, that's why we intentionally did not put it in there. We didn't want to put any onus on neighbors or their engineer when we really don't have, I'll say, control over them to some extent, because we can't force them to engage somebody. We can certainly force the applicant to jump through hoops, but it's hard to do that for neighbors and their engineers. So, there's gonna be we were pretty clear, I thought, that that any third party needed to be included, and Redness and Mead is at least the first one, as you said, always works with the town. So, I mean, they're gonna have to figure that out. And then I thought we intentionally did not put anything in there, again, to not to have to compel the neighbors for any reason.
Or tell Redness and Mead, I guess. But so I guess somebody just really has to monitor what's going on in the future, like every week or so, to see if any conversation has taken place.
I mean, what we can do is just ask staff to tell the engineer,
Oh, that'd be great.
ask the town engineer, when you meet with them, the expectation is that there should be some outreach to at least Redness and Mead or the neighbors to the best of their ability, because that would satisfy the condition. I mean, if, they call Redness and Mead 5 times with no answer and nobody's picking up from the neighbors, and, at some point they gotta move on. But I doubt that's gonna be the case, and, we'll ask the town engineer just to be mindful of the fact that the neighbor's expert should be reached out to and consulted, should he be retained.
So our staff will know if engineering department has conversations with the applicant, even though it's a separate department, right? I mean, Jim or Emily, I'm sorry, Mr. Went or Ms. Harrigan would know that, and then they could internally reach out to one of the wasn't there a ringleader established last time we were here of the neighbors, like a leader of the neighborhood? Didn't he have to give his name to us or something?
Yes, there is, but again, there's a 9-year performance time span.
Okay.
On it. So they could be working on this unbeknownst to us now, or they could come back 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now. The condition is we can't issue a building permit until the town engineer is satisfied. So yes, whenever that may be, administratively, the building permit will not be authorized by, we won't sign off on it until we have the town engineer on board.
And the town engineer, as I recall, said no comment. They have not looked at this at all yet. So I don't know if they aren't. I
No,
don't
they
know.
will have had a conversation with the town engineer. They're familiar with the conditions of approval, so I don't think there'll be any issue internally with us communicating with the engineering department.
Okay, so we can count on our department talking to engineer and being notified that something is happening, and then they will notify either Redness and Mead or the neighbor somehow. Just so something doesn't get lost in.
We can be mindful of that, but again, it's not, again, the requirement is that the drainage gets revised to the satisfaction of the town engineer. To the extent any other players are involved, will be up to those players.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the minutes? We put this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
I'm sorry, could you restate what we're?
Aye.
Moving to approve the meeting minutes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Aye.
I got
Aye.
Steve, Dan, okay, yeah, I heard 3 ayes from the remote and I saw 7 hands, correct?
You saw my hand, yes.
4 hands and 3 ayes.
So it passes unanimously. Next item is 385 and 409 Quincy Street, referral pursuant to section 824 of the Connecticut Criminal statutes regarding the proposed leasing of town property. Mr. Barnhart, good evening.
Good evening. Very briefly, Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development for the town of Fairfield. The town is proposing to enter into a long-term ground lease with Habitat for Humanity for 2 properties within the Parking Commons development, also known as the Navy or Military Housing Site. These are 385 and 409 Quincy Street. Town reacquired these parcels a few years back using funds from the Housing Trust Fund for the purposes of redeveloping both parcels, in part to address longstanding FEMA flood compliance issues. These are all built slab on grade at elevation, I think 9.7 or 9.6. Flood elevation in that area after Sandy is now 11. So the idea is to demo the existing structures and build new duplexes on the site at the correct flood elevation. Obviously, both to preserve existing affordable home ownership units, but also to add to our inventory. The lease, the act of leasing town property needs to come before this commission in its capacity, its planning capacity under Connecticut General Statute 8-24, which is why it's before you this evening. The proposed ground lease and other documents have been approved by the Board of Selectmen. Will go to the RTM later this month. We're looking for your favorable consideration on that matter. Should be noted the actual site plan development itself will require a coastal site plan application to this board, so you'll see it coming back when we're ready to actually proceed with development. Happy to take any questions at this time.
I
Questions?
have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, so these are, for some reason, I thought this was up by the Tunxus Hill. Those are completely separate, not under the same type of agreement. The ones that are on Greenfield Street.
Yeah, that's a separate property and ground lease. So we're doing ground leases for each parcel.
So each ground lease, there's a separate lease for each parcel. And is this the same type of thing that we did up there on Greenfield Street where
Right.
we
Correct.
own the land, they lease it, and they do the development? They've already torn down the 2 single-family homes. Now they're going to put 2 duplexes up.
Yes.
And there's no inland wetlands, and
No.
the only review we would have, would we have a regular, I know the 8-24 is just a report of favorability or not, that then goes to the town to be able to execute the lease, right?
Right. Anytime you sell or purchase or lease town property, it would require a review by this board under Connecticut General Statute 8-24.
Okay, are these,
You're not actually approving the development itself. That will need to come back as a separate action before this board under a coastal statement application.
so we don't, it will come back as a coastal and a special permit, so we would be able to figure out then about things like stormwater.
Just
and-
a coastal site plan application, not a special permit.
Oh, because it's 8-24? Okay. Will this have engineering and conservation department review or commission review?
We will certainly be reviewing with appropriate departments, including our engineering department. Yes.
Okay, and these are 100% affordable, and is it in perpetuity or is it restricted to 40 years?
In perpetuity.
And this would count then towards our HF30G ratio as well as any future moratorium?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you.
You are.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Two brief questions. What's the term of the lease and what are the terms of the lease?
It's a 75-year ground lease renewable. Each time its successor in title will renew it for another 75 years to keep it in essentially in perpetuity. And it's basically $1 a year.
Thank you.
Comments, questions? Probably should have motion for a recommendation, yeah. I should have started that. May I have a motion on the item, please, Commissioner Porcello?
Move to recommend a
Positive
positive,
recommendation.
yeah.
Positive recommendation. Second, Commissioner Randolph. Any comments, questions?
I think this is a no-brainer, would be a huge improvement, additions.
Commissioner Randolph.
I think that the addition of affordable housing is much needed and the proposed site plan yet to be approved of duplexes on single family lots is such a good precedent for the reuse of existing property.
I would ask if we could put any guidance in there, to consider low impact development stormwater techniques. This is a flood prone area and it's highly densified already. And I believe this will probably add to the impervious surface if we're replacing two single families with two duplexes with parking. Is there a way of putting that in there for people to consider that
We
they
definitely
should?
will.
Yeah, and
Okay.
as far as tree canopy, replacing trees that they might have to cut down with new trees?
To the extent to which I think will comply with regulations regarding trees. So yes, it would
The
be our,
regulation, yeah, well, the regulation now only relates to in the town right of way, because that's what the tree warden regulates, but, and we don't have another tree ordinance. But I would just, as a suggestion, not a mandate, I know we're only giving a report, just to raise this in the profile of everybody thinking about it. When you take down a tree, you should plant a tree to help with a lot of things. So is there a way of putting that in our recommendation?
Yeah, I think we should, we're gonna have the CAM application coming, see what it is. I wouldn't hamstring them now with anything. Mr. Barnard heard everything and is understanding of what you're saying with environmental considerations, so.
definitely take that under advisement. What you're approving is the actual act of ground leasing town property.
I hear you. Thank you.
That, yeah. Put this to a vote. All those in favor of the positive recommendation, please say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Dan Ford, aye.
Hi, Kathy Braun.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barnhart. I will call, we're going to new applications for recommendation to public hearing. I'll call them en masse.
Point of order.
Can I call them first, or do you want to?
I would like to go through them individually for a few different reasons, which I can explain, rather than en masse.
Start with A and A1 zoning regulation amendment application of 1477 Congress Street LLC to establish a new section 5.4 Congress Street Affordable Housing District pursuant to 830G of the Connecticut statutes. 1477 Congress Street application of 1477 Congress Street LLC to establish a Congress Street Affordable Housing District on land presently zoned resident AAA. When? Further,
I think let's take questions.
we have a
So-
motion item. Corsello,
Move to approve.
is there a second?
Move to recommend to public hearing rather.
No, I think that's okay. Commissioner Randolph seconds, Commissioner Corsello,
They're required.
Commissioner Randolph,
As required.
Commissioner Braun.
Yeah, here's my questions related to all of them. We have 11 applications. Some are relating to the same property today. It's a huge influx of new applications, a lot of them 8-30G. We're already meeting every week. And once, I have a question for Mr. Went about procedure. Once we accept something for a public hearing, is that what triggers the 35 days during which we have to have the public hearing? And also, we have 65 days by statute to hold a public hearing. So where are we in the process on these ones that you just listed? Which phase are we in? Are we in the 65-day period? Because what I would like to do is if we refer it to a public hearing and that's what triggers the 35 days, I would like to hold off as long as possible because we have too many coming in. It's too much for us to handle. We're meeting every week and we need to be responsible and effective, not just efficient, but effective. And I don't see how that could be done by piling on so many more new ones. We have no control over it. So if we have leeway in the length of time from when something comes in the door. I don't see any,
Let's ask Mr. Wen, go ahead.
I can explain that. It's a mix. Some of these applications, the ones that are just a zoning compliance application, you have 65 days total to act, whether or not you have a public hearing.
It's filed.
The ones that are regulation amendments or zone changes, you have 65 days to begin the hearing, 35 days to complete, and then 65 days to act. Whether or not you move these to public hearing tonight, the statute date or definition of date of receipt is the date of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the commission following the day that the application was submitted, or 30 days, whichever is less. So whether or not you take any action on these tonight is the next regularly scheduled meeting per statute that these applications, so that the time clock starts tonight on these, whether you accept them formally or not. Some of them have longer periods of time. Like I said, if it's a zone change application or a regulation amendment, that gives you the 65, 35, 65 clock. It's just a site plan approval. It's 65 days to act.
and if we don't,
Subject to any extensions we might be able to secure from applicants.
if we don't refer it to a public hearing, what happens?
Nothing. We're gonna have to schedule for public hearing whether you accept it or not. The idea of having this, there's no requirement that you take the step that we're taking here. The statute defines when the application is received pursuant to the time frame that the statute subscribes. We do this process because we have a pretty broad distribution of our agenda, firstly, or secondly, I should say, firstly, to give you guys notice of what's in the hopper to come, and secondly, to give the public the first warning that, hey, these applications are in, and they can start looking at them in preparing. So that's the purpose of having this section of the agenda, that there's nothing in the statute that requires you to formally accept something. It's done automatically pursuant to section 8-7. The date of receipt is prescribed by statute.
So what would be helpful is, because some of these, none of the new ones that are being referred to public hearing are on, I don't think they're on, when you do the link for the materials, most of them are not on that link because it's not on for a public hearing tonight, but you can backtrack to something called pending, but some of them are not in pending either. And
Not all, we haven't had the opportunity to upload everything yet.
Oh.
I know,
Yeah, this is the problem.
Some of them are, some of them are not. The Byro Street materials are all up, the 4480
Yeah.
Black Rock Turnpike materials are all up. We haven't had a chance to.
And
We,
this Congress Street one that we're talking about right now, 1477, that does not say it's an 8-30G compliance application. That says it's to create some kind of affordable housing zone.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it does say 8-30G. So is this a standard 8-30G where they're also seeking a text amendment, which really isn't needed? So there's two applications. Is this a compliance application, which means the time period is different than if it's not a compliance application?
No, they have not yet submitted a compliance application. They've applied for a new regulation in a zone change to establish that new zone. So with a conceptual site plan, so this would be an application that would be a 65 day time period.
Meaning 35 days from now.
No, 65 days from today to begin the hearing,
Okay.
35 days to complete the hearing once you start it, and then another 65 days to act.
Okay. And are we,
Commissioner Braun, can I make a suggestion? Can we ask these questions not during our public hearing? Because right now, as we've always indicated, these need to go to public hearing. This is kind of the first salvo. As Mr. Wentz said, the time period has already started, so if we can get through them now and move on to the other business, I think that would be our time.
I don't mind doing them in bulk since they all have to follow that protocol, but I have one more request of Mr. Went, which is we're getting a moratorium probably within 30 to 45 days. I believe it's 90 days from when we applied, which was like in mid-December. Once that happens, I don't know how long it takes to get the actual certification, But there will be no more HF30G. So we can expect more of them, and we can't control that. We can't control, obviously, when we refer them to public hearing, but we can control where in the 65 days we'll schedule it. Are we trying to put them out as far as possible in that 65-day period just to modulate the flow a little bit? It's getting almost overwhelming, honestly.
Well, I would agree with you that it's getting overwhelming. There's no doubt about that. We have scheduled meetings every Tuesday of this month, and we'll likely need to do so again in March. But we'll do what we can. We don't want to miss a deadline. We expect
No,
more.
sure. Yeah.
So we're just going to have to fight our way through it just to get through the business. So I understand it's a lot to ask of you, but that's just the nature of the beast, the way the statute is set up and the way the moratorium time frame works.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Braun, and again to the commission, I've been saying this for weeks and months now, because this is kind of showing what our schedule is. Not only do we have to be efficient, as Commissioner Braun rightly notes, but we have to be effective. At the same time, we have to be efficient and timely. So best we can do to prepare before you have questions of staff respect to, the site of a site plan, for example, what the particulars mean, what this does. These questions, I think, not during our public hearings. That's not an effective or efficient use of our time. So again, we need to be as prepared as we can, because that will only make us these next few weeks a lot easier. Otherwise, it's going to be all of February, all of March, all of April, and all of May. So again, I'll keep saying it to everybody, to the commission, and this includes me. We have to prepare for every meeting. We have to ask staff questions beforehand. We should not be asking kind of rudimentary questions, how things work questions during our public hearings. So my friendly reminder.
Well, it is a public hearing and things have to get on the record. So that's
Yeah, but how a drainage system works doesn't need to be part of the record. If you have a question about whether it's suitable or this, that's fine. But having the applicant explain the drainage system for 10 or 15 minutes or 20 or more is not an effective use of time. The plans are part of the record, so it's already part of the record.
Well, during that discourse, he admitted he did not do the testing that was required on Soundview. That's why I asked the question.
You don't need
Lack
to
of
ask the
understanding.
questions about how the system works in
Right.
order to talk about if the test pits were done.
During the course of that, it came out that things were not done the right
I'm
way.
not gonna keep repeating myself. I mean, again, I don't think how something works is effective to some of the questions that you asked. Want to ask about what testing was done, go for it, but not how the system works. So right now we have a motion for moving this A and A1 to public hearing. Are there any other further comments on that? We'll put this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, Dan Ford.
Still in on this. Commissioner Collins, you're still in,
Aye.
yeah.
I
I saw 4 hands and then 3 voice ayes, so passes unanimously. Commissioner Braun, can I call them en masse now?
Can you list them so we know what we're doing?
What I do? Yes, but can I call them all together now?
Sure.
Thank you. Zoning regulation amendment, application of 108 Biro LLC to establish a new section 5.3 Biro Development District pursuant to 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. 108 Biro Street, application of 108 Biro LLC to establish a Biro Development District on land presently zoned resident C. 108 Biro Street, zoning compliance application of 108 Biro LLC for a 100-unit residential building pursuant to section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. 168 Kings Drive, zoning compliance application of John Moransky, trustee for C. Coco and A. Pekarsky for a 10-unit residential development pursuant to section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. 4480 Black Rock Turnpike, zoning compliance application of 4480 Black Rock LLC for a 96-unit residential development pursuant to 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. 1427 and 1443 Kings Highway, special permit application of John and Tim Philbin for an 18-unit residential building in the Design Commerce District Drive. Thank you. For the record, I will be recusing myself from the items B, one of, the Biro Street. Happy to recuse myself from those. I seem ministerial to move them to public hearing, which is needed, so, but I will be recusing myself for those applications. Anything further, or can we move this, well, let me take a motion, as I said, is required, entertain a motion to recommend to public hearing. Commissioner Corsillo,
Move to recommend all to public hearing.
there's second, Commissioner Randolph seconds. Anything further? Hearing none, can we place this to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
They all pass unanimously. 43, going to old business, 43 Chambers Street, 46 Weber Street. Special permit application, 43 Chambers Street LLC. For construction of a contractor's storage and maintenance building in the design industrial district.
I'm gonna do this one.
Hi, Ms. Harrigan.
Hi. For 43 Chambers Street, the subject parcel is located in the Design Industrial District and is presently used as a contractor storage yard. The applicant seeks to build a new storage and maintenance building with provision for exterior storage of landscaping materials. The proposed building is 63 feet by 40 feet with 3 oversized garage bays. The proposal complies with all of the Design Industrial District.
All the
design-
830Gs were submitted and approved for a public hearing at once.
Taxpayers talking.
Pardon me?
Excuse me, this is not time for public comment, so the members of the public joining remotely, please mute yourself. Ms. Harrigan.
The engineering department has confirmed the review and approval of the revised storm drainage calculations. The code comments were addressed in the revised plans. Concrete curbs, sidewalks, and driveway aprons are proposed on both streets, and 6 new street trees are proposed. The only potential exception to the code comments is the provision of bicycle parking. As this is not a pedestrian generating use, the commission can decide whether or not a bike rack should be provided. The considerations for the special permit are found in section 25.7.7. Is the development shown on the site and architectural plans of such characters to harmonize with the neighborhood, to accomplish a transition in character between areas of unlike character, to protect property values in the neighborhood, to preserve and enhance the beauty and the appearance and beauty of the community, and to avoid undue traffic congestion. Just as a reminder, Jim also sent an email on Wednesday following our last meeting, just to provide an email provide the email from the engineering department within the file cloud storage, and also to address the question about compensatory flood storage, as they are proposing a very small amount of fill, 58 cubic yards, but that flood storage is provided with the depressed landscaping beds.
Housekeeping matter, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if Mr. Collins watched the video of the last meeting, or
Last meeting?
Last week, yes. He was not present at the hearing, so we would need both Mr. Delgado and Mr. Siebert to vote for, since Mr. Wait, Dan, if Dan has watched, he wasn't at the last meeting either, but if you watched Webster Street, he's good.
Commissioner
Yeah, I'm
Ford?
good. Sorry. Yes, I watched it this afternoon.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Mr. Delgado then would have to, it would be his turn to
Okay,
swap out with Peter here.
For Harrison.
Chamber Street.
for Harrison, yes, please. Commissioner Delgado, would you go with Chambers Street? Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Harrigan?
No.
Thank you. May I have a motion on the item? Commissioner Porcillo,
Move to approve.
Commissioner, and then second is Commissioner Randolph. Commissioner Porcillo.
The application satisfies the conditions for a special permit and an improvement over the structure that is currently there and more in line with kind of what's surrounding it.
Any thoughts on bike rack?
I mean, I recommend including it. I don't think it's given the area that it's in, I'm not sure how much use it's going to get, but
Well, it's kind of the thought, I guess, is that's not gonna be much use, but we open it up to everybody else. Just get it on for people to talk about. Keep it on then, keep it in.
Mhm.
Commissioner Randolph?
The use is suitable to the area. As the landscaping, proposed landscapings would be an improvement. Perhaps the bike rack could be purchased and installed somewhere else in town, if that's a possibility.
Bike rack and Lou.
Since the bike rack,
Yes.
and
The bike rack to be purchased and placed somewhere else. I just made the
You
joke.
can
I
put it in
like,
the right of way instead of in near the building, if that's what you.
I would defer to staff to suggest the alternate location for the bike rack. I don't think it's necessary at the specific location.
I love the idea. I'm just not sure if we're able to do that.
We can't compel it. We can talk to them about it, see if they'd be willing, but then we'd have to have a willing receiver.
So I guess maybe it's either put it in on the site close to the right of way, or see about finding other suitable place in town. At least we have cover our bases.
Steve,
Hold on
might be
one-
that,
Hold on one second, I'll go right to you, Steve. Commissioner Corsillo, is that a fair?
fine by me.
Okay, so amend the motion as such? Yeah. Commissioner Randolph, is that good? Commissioner Levy, you're up.
yeah, it might be that employees could use a bike rack, but I would leave it up to the placement of the rack, either on the site or other suitable site up to staff, working with staff.
That's currently what we have is motion to approve bike rack, either on site at the very least, or somewhere else, some other suitable place if they're able to find such a suitable place. We lost something here. Like the image. Like the image of this room. Steve, can you still hear us?
No, somebody's adding.
Somebody's.
Is this the motion to amend the motion that we're talking about, or is this the motion to approve we're talking about?
Hold on, we got somebody shared their screen somehow.
I've got Erblink is sharing.
Commissioner Braun, just as a point of order, we had in a discussion with Commissioner Corsillo and then Randolph, it was proposed that the motion be amended. And Commissioner Corsillo agreed to it, Commissioner Randolph agreed to it, but it's motion to approve bike racks either on site at a minimum or at another location, subject to finding a suitable recipient or a willing recipient.
I think we have to vote on the amendment, no?
Well, the request was made, at least the second person who seconded made the request for amendments, and the person who moved it has accepted that.
So are we having discussion on the amendment or on the motion? I can have a comment about both.
On the amended motion, go ahead.
So I totally agree. I think it's great. I do think a lot of times landscaping employees don't have their own vehicles, so it would be good to have a bike rack in case they need to ride a bike. As far as the position, somewhere in the vicinity, that I agree, that could be worked out with staff, but I do think we should require a bike rack. My question is for Ms. Harrigan. I know that engineering wrote a note. Can you just clarify, they did something with stormwater to accommodate the added fill situation, but does that also accommodate your question on the code review that was done where you said there's an increase in the site grade, which is not allowed in the FEMA floodplain without compensatory storage? Does that compensatory storage that they provided satisfy both questions or just the one about
Two different
the fill?
questions. There are two different questions. So the compensatory storage is within our flood regulations. And they're satisfying that by doing the the landscape depressions. So they're offsetting the fill that they need to bring in on site by proposing those, basically they're rain gardens. but they provide the compensatory storage during a flooding condition. So it's separate from the on-site detention system.
So that was already answered in the plans they submitted that we already looked at then, right? The other question had to do with fill and compensatory storage for fill, right?
Yes, and both were addressed on the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? We put this to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Passes unanimously. Zoning regulation amendment, application of Pequot Realty LLC to amend section 25.7.10 zoning regulations with regard to permitting off-site below market rate units to satisfy inclusionary zoning requirements.
You're doing this one, right?
Commissioner Ford, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, are you recusing yourself from this?
Yes, yes. Well, I'll be out.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings
So that brings Mr. Siebert to the party now,
Commissioner Siebert.
in addition to Mr. Delgado,
Yes,
unless,
Commissioner Delgado, Commissioner Siebert, you guys are
Talking
up.
about regulation 27.5.7.10.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Went.
Want me to do it?
go ahead.
All right, doesn't matter. Okay, for zoning regulation amendment section 25.7.10, the applicant seeks to permit the ability for the commission to consider off-site below market rate units in lieu of on-site units to satisfy the inclusionary zoning requirement for below market rate units in a new development. Consideration for such off-site units would be completely discretionary on the commission's part and only applicable to developments intended for owner-occupied units for sale developments. Developments intended for rental occupancy would not be eligible for consideration. The proposed language is flexible to allow consideration of conveyance of off-site units to town-related entities or other nonprofit entities that could allow for lower income level thresholds, longer time duration, and would allow for consideration of either rental or owner occupancy of the off-site units. While the proposed language allows the commission to exercise discretion as to the location and size of any proposed off-site units, during the hearing, the commission also seemed to want to include consideration of value or other relevant considerations of the proposed off-site units compared to the market rate unit values. It's important to note that this is completely discretionary, and if the commission is not satisfied with the parameters of any off-site proposal, the owner of the development would still be obligated to provide the required on-site units. Standard considerations for a regulation amendment include: is the proposal consistent with the plan of conservation and development? Does time, experience, and responsible planning for contemporary or future conditions reasonably indicate the need for the change? Has it been demonstrated that the proposal is warranted and would serve the general health, welfare, and safety of the town? If you have any questions?
Excuse me, thank you. May I have a motion on the item? Commissioner Corsillo,
Move to approve.
is there a second? Second, Commissioner Siebert. Just to be clear, the text that we have has those two minor edits that we already put in.
It does not yet. The proposed text was: the commission shall have the sole discretion as to the adequacy of the size and location of the off-site BMR units. I think my recollection of the discussion from the hearing was you wanted to add to that sentence "and value or other relevant considerations," so that
That's my recollection as well, but I will let,
So-
maybe amend the motion then to some extent.
yeah, so it would read, the commission shall have the sole discretion as to the adequacy of the size, location, and value and other relevant considerations of the off-site below market rate units.
Yeah, no two ands, just
Right.
comma, value,
Yep.
comma, and.
Size, location, value, and other relevant considerations.
Well, Commissioner Corsillo, right now the motion does not have those edits in there.
I will amend it to include those additions, which I was thinking were already in there.
Yeah, I thought as well. That's why I wanted to clarify it. Commissioner Siebert, are you
Second.
second that? Okay. Commissioner Corcel, go ahead.
So I think this satisfies the considerations for a regulation amendment. There was one that I was sort of wrestling with and was really on the fence about this for a while because I think most, if not the entire commission, has some concern about where affordable housing is being put and some parts of town shouldering a disproportionate share of the burden of that. And I think I'm certainly sensitive. I think others are about creating some backdoor mechanism to avoid adding affordable housing in some of the more expensive parts of town, which is where I think we need more of it. But I think after hearing all the comments of my fellow commissioners, I'm pretty comfortable that everyone shares that concern and a desire to make sure that we're adding affordable housing in throughout town. And I feel comfortable that we have the flexibility in here and the language that kind of steers us toward making sure this is not just a way for developers to get out of putting affordable housing in wealthier parts of town. So I support it with those changes and based on the discussion we've had.
Thank you. Commissioner Siebert,
I support that.
thank you. Commissioner Randolph,
I was initially reluctant to support this because of the unintended consequences of perhaps not co-locating affordable housing with more higher priced housing. But the addition of the qualification that gives the commission sole discretion with few qualifications leaves it to this board to make a judgment on the alternate sites for these offsite units. I think it also gives us, and as was cited during the conversation, additional resource to provide affordable housing for the community. And it's as someone said, it's an additional tool or toolbox. So I support this recommendation, this text amendment.
thank you.
I have a question about the fee and
Go ahead.
lieu that we discussed last time. Since we're being so flexible in this regulation, why couldn't we at least have that flexibility that if we choose to accept a fee in lieu, we could do so? We don't have to put the details of, 350% of this or that or whatever they were talking about. It was a complicated scenario when they were trying to detail how much the fee in lieu should be, but why wouldn't we allow the flexibility of the zoning commission being able to take a fee in lieu instead of moving the unit somewhere else?
Well, Commissioner Braun, we had that application for that regulation amendment 6, 8 months ago, last year, obviously. And we had that discussion and the commission voted it down for a variety of reasons, not just for the valuation, but also the commission, as far as I can recollect, the commission's desire to get the units. Because the concern that was brought up, I think by Mr. Barnhart, was you put money into a fund, that's great, it can be used, but the town as a municipality is very slow and it doesn't move as quickly as a private developer to get the appropriate land for what the fee in lieu would be used for. And I think that, plus the valuation and plus the desire to get units at the site of the rental development, we turned it down. Now we have this, I won't say companion, but very similar application that deals with for sale units only. So I certainly can't and propose amendments like fee in lieu at this point. We reopen the whole hearing. Should we decide to do fee in lieu in the future, we can certainly consider that. But right now, we just have this text amendment for which deals with units in lieu of.
But, right, so we voted it down a year ago or so because that was the only thing offered. Now we have a, something that we can do that makes sense. The fee in lieu would add another option. We don't have to put any details in there, just like there's no details on anything else. It would be totally at our discretion to accept a fee in lieu. And couldn't we devise how that calculation will be done at that time?
We had that opportunity when that application was before us and we voted it down.
But that's, right, this is a different application. This
We
would be
can't
another aspect of the current application.
Well, we can't add it though, because we'd be reopening the hearing. I mean, I guess if that's where the commission wants to go, then I guess so be it, but I mean, I would urge us to consider voting on this specific application, and if we really have a desire to revisit it, then we can bring forth our own regulation amendments at a future time.
I prefer to do it all at once, rather than try to reopen something later on. We have this pending now.
We certainly can't, even if anybody were to, which, I mean, again, this is the commission's decision. Anybody makes the motion to amend to do a fee in lieu, we're not voting on it tonight. We would have to reopen the hearing.
By reopening it, that means changing, why would we have to reopen? Because of the timeframes?
No, because we are going to be going outside of the footprint of the application. We're going to be expanding what was applied to us. And while we can certainly restrict in our discretion, we can't expand it without reopening the hearing.
Well, can I get a sense of the body rather than try to make an amendment? Would other people agree that now is the time to offer that flexibility rather than try to revisit this later? I always felt that with the ADA regulation, we should have, expanded it then and not worry about reopening the hearing because it was already before us and we were current on all the details. Coming back later might never happen. I just think it's nice to have the flexibility since we have very little requirements in the whole regulation. It's completely flexible for totally discretionary, anything we do with this.
Well, you don't have to go through the particulars of the benefits of it. I mean, again, as I said, we voted it down last year, but if you want to get a sense of whether commission wants to do that, we'll go down the line. Commissioner Levy looks like he wants to jump in, so I'll ask him for his comments and for that too.
Yeah, I'd like to focus on what's on the agenda, which is a discrete proposal, which we discussed at length at the last public hearing. It deals specifically with the problem of for sale units and below market rate units in lieu. And I think this is a discrete proposal, which gives us sole discretion. And for that reason, I support it. In terms of the fee in lieu, we did discuss it at length. That would require a whole separate public hearing, and I do not think that's appropriate to discuss this evening and would limit my support to what's on the table. Thank you.
Those are the only two commissioners. Yeah, there's where recuse himself. Go down the line if you like, or Commissioner Corsillo.
I'll just say, I am not comfortable reopening the hearing, I think for a couple of reasons. One, as Chair Noonan mentioned, we had a vote on, the commission had a vote on this, on that version of the application or the text amendment, and voted against it. And as Commissioner Braun noted, we have a very full schedule with applications. And I think to be reopening a hearing on a matter that was already heard and voted on, and where we have an application right now in front of us to vote on, I don't think would be an efficient or effective use of the commission's time.
Thank you. Commissioner Randall.
The clause that gives the commission sole discretion, doesn't have to be reasonable, but sole discretion safeguards any future decision-making. I support the motion as it stands.
Yeah, I mean, I would support moving forward with this. I mean, progress, I think, is better than taking steps backwards. More specifically, because we had this discussion last year, as I said, and I remember the applicant, obviously wanted this was proposing it. It was the same applicant, well, at least the same attorney for the applicant. And he was very amenable to almost anything we would have had suggested. Whether it was absolute discretion or just kind of, and, not being facetious or not being, crude about it. He just, he believed, and the applicant believed that the fee in lieu was a great idea and we were willing to work with you on it. And the commission, same commission kind of sitting here, I mean, not literally, I guess, but I mean, the same commission that, is present, voted against it however many months ago. So I'm certainly open to reopening it, the idea. I'm not sure it changes my mind where I was, because for all the reasons we said back then, but I just don't, I agree with Commissioner Corsillo, we should be voting on what we have here.
I'm in favor of this regulation. I think it's excellent. I like the flexibility. I just felt like but I agree. Let's move on.
And to Commissioner Levy's point, I mean, this addresses what seems to be a practical flaw with 830Gs and ownership units, which adds, places burdens on below market rate owners because of HOA fees and other things that, that add up to the housing costs. So this is designed to alleviate that pragmatic or practical flaw, so to speak. Despite maybe what Commissioner Levy and I have said in the past about it. And if we see that this is working well, we can certainly expand it. I mean, truth be told, sale units, 830G for sale units are kind of few and far between.
We haven't had an 8-30G for sale product at all. These, the products that are for sale units.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pardon my interruption.
No, but I
Or a product of the inclusionary zoning
no, excuse
requirement.
me, I was saying 830G for, I guess, habits sake from section 2. But you're right, it wasn't just 830Gs, it was for sale below market rates in general.
But
So
we do have ownership units that are affordable, right? They're just not we have a
yeah,
number.
no, I misspoke. I said
Yep.
830G, but I meant below market rate. I apologize.
But a question for Mr. Wendt. We do have a number, because I've looked at all of our affordable units in town. We have dozens of individual owned single family residences that are affordable, or maybe duplexes around town, don't we? Like in the Navy area and everything?
Sure, yes, like the proposal you heard from Mr. Barnhart this evening, those 2 duplexes will
Right.
be ownership units.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
in
These are probably
a
more
sense,
in
but
line to rectify ownership below market rate units in HOAs or in
yeah,
condominiums.
but typically
Apartments.
the ownership units that are there are discrete units that are all affordable. They're not mixed in with a mixed project that's both market rate and affordable.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you. That clarifies it.
Further comments, or can we put this to a vote? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Yeah, you're in on this, right?
Yep.
2, 4, 5, yeah. So passes unanimously. Next are compliances, 1499 Post Road, application of Maurizio Ricci to establish a food service use gelato in a portion of an existing building in the center design.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the subject site is a multi-tenant retail office building on the corner of Reef Road and Post Road. Tenant space that was most recently occupied by Chico's clothing store. This is a proposed gelato style ice cream shop that will have both some modest seating area and provision for takeout service. It's a permitted use. Because of the seating, it would require 3 additional parking spaces than the existing retail use. You may recall back in June, there was an adjacent tenant space formerly occupied by Wells Fargo Bank that had been approved for a large restaurant use that had a variance for 31 parking spaces. That apparently there is a tenant on the second floor that has veto authority over their proposed lease, so that restaurant use is not going to go forward. some other use might, but there's a letter in this file that the owner of the property has agreed to allocate 3 of those spaces that they got relief from to this use to offset that parking requirement. Other than that, it's a interior fit up for a, gelato shop. We expect most of
This
this
is
to
in
be
that-
foot traffic.
In that bookstore complex.
Correct. It's in the same building with Fairfield University Bookstore and other tenants.
I have a motion on the item.
Motion to approve. We're voting on it now, right? Yeah.
Yep, looking for motion. So motion to approve by Commissioner Braun. Is there a second? Commissioner Randolph. Commissioner Braun?
The plans you just showed are different than the ones I see that were attached. Is that more detailed than what I'm looking at?
I didn't see what you just saw.
Well, the thing that's posted looks different than what you showed just now. It looked like it had more something, more seat chairs or more seat tables or something like that. But I have just a couple questions. Yeah, so this is 2 stories, but this will be just on the ground floor. Is there any parking situation? This is a shared parking with a parking garage? That's the parking that they have available for this, or street parking?
Yes, the parking for this building is accessed by Sherman Street. There's a
Okay.
large parking lot behind it and a second level parking deck.
And is there any outside dining included with this? Or will there be?
It's not part of this application. There could be, but they haven't made that part of their proposal.
And the Cleveland is the landlord. I was trying to figure out, I thought it was maybe a neighboring person, but now that I know it's right there, that's the landlord. So he's
Correct.
making that offer. Okay.
Well, they're confirming that because the variance goes to the land, not to any individual applicant, they're agreeing to transfer, if you will, the rights of the adjacent tenant of 3 parking spaces to this tenant to make that shortfall work.
Okay, and the prior variance was granted to the prior applicant. Is that relevant to this? I see it in your staff comment.
It was an adjacent vacant storefront, which was formerly occupied by Wells Fargo. There was a upscale New York style steakhouse going to be located in there, but
Yeah.
that's not going to
Okay.
happen.
Good enough. Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Randolph, sorry.
I strongly support this application. I think it's indicative of how archaic our parking regulations are, that we're even having this conversation. And it's a use that complies with our downtown and supports pedestrian traffic and the overall viability for downtown.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from the commission? I think Commissioner Ford is still out. Jumped off. He said he would jump back on with POCD. So Commissioner Sieber, I think you're still in on this.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I fully support this proposal. I think it fits with the space that's there versus what was previously proposed for Steakhouse. And the parking spaces that are supported behind, which I know very well. I think this is perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is great. Great use, meets our regulations, complies with our regulations, so I don't see a reason to deny, but final thoughts or questions? Let's move on. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Passes.
Aye.
Braun?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes unanimously. On to our public hearing section. Zoning regulations amendments, application of Fairfield Medical LLC to amend section 29.8.2 of the zoning regulations with regard to signs visible from the Merritt Parkway located in a design commercial district, and section 29.10.1 with regard to the size of wall signs in a single tenant building. So last we went, we had, you can stay, we had finished our initial presentation move on to public hearing. And I understand that you may have a proposal for us in line with what Commissioner Randolph had talked about. So it makes sense for me to let you propose that. So, yeah, so instead of getting it at the end with a rebuttal, public can hear it up front, and should there be additional public comment, they will be able to respond to it.
Sure. Thanks. We just hand it to Joel, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, Attorney Russo.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Chris Russo with Russo and Rizio LLC offices at 10 Saskville Hill Road in Fairfield, Connecticut, here on behalf of the applicant. Chair, as you noted, we concluded our presentation last week, but did have some thoughts and spoke to staff regarding possible language that could be added to restrict this. So not expanding, no expanding, restricting further, based on the feedback that we received, Commissioner Randolph, some of the comments that you had made particularly. So what you see in front of you, again, this is just a suggestion. It's not really, it's not like presenting new material in the sense of like new evidence. It's really just kind of a suggested as far as a clarifying language, restricting language that could be added. Except for lots. So the first one's 29.8.2, which regards signs along Connecticut Turnpike and Merritt Parkway. What we had originally said was that no sign on such lots shall be erected which faces or is primarily intended to be visible from the Connecticut Turnpike or Merritt Parkway, as the case may be. What we had originally posed to add was except for lots which abut the right of way or access road of the Merritt Parkway and are located within the designed commercial district. A single wall sign, so this is the added language, sorry. A single wall sign shall be permitted on the wall with the smallest amount of area, which faces the Merritt Parkway, and all other wall signs shall not be visible from the Merritt Parkway. So this would restrict it if you had multiple walls that were facing the Merritt. It would be the wall with the least amount of area that could have the wall sign, which, would obviously restrict it in size and what you could do there. The other is the last part of the sentence, and all other wall signs shall not be visible from the Merritt Parkway. I think that was in response to what Commissioner Levy said about if there's a second wall sign, where is that going to be? Because you're allowed to. We had used as an example the existing medical center building it's currently being built, and that it would allow a wall sign to face the parking area, which doesn't face Merritt Parkway, but that there wouldn't be another. So you couldn't there's two walls on that particular building that face towards Merritt Parkway. So you wouldn't be able to put a sign on each of those walls. So that's what that clarifying language, restricting language is intended to do. Then the next part is 29.10.1, which is regarding, so it's about the area of the sign. And it says a sign may occupy up to 20% of the area of the wall to which it is attached, or 72 square feet, whichever is less. The language we had originally proposed was except each wall sign on a single tenant building, which contains multiple stories, may occupy up to 15% of the area of the wall to which it is attached. But to cap it, because there was some concern that was just open-ended, completely open-ended, we put, but it shall not exceed 350 square feet. So to put a total cap on that potential sign. Again, I'm trying to be efficient in going through these applications. I don't think I need to rehash the arguments, but again, multiple tenant buildings can have 72 square foot signs. You could have 6, you could have 7. It depends on the wall area, and up to 20%. This is applying it just to single tenant buildings, and it is putting an overall cap on it. That we think is reasonable. We went through some hypotheticals and showed what that sign could potentially look like, which we think is a reasonable size for a multiple story building that has a single tenant. So that's really all to add, I think, from last
So
week.
let me just clarify, what I think we should do, and I think this is what you've done is, in your initial presentation, initial application, you had the bolded. So looking, at least for us, we have new with red fonts, but your initial application was just the amendments that were in bolded fonts.
Bolded black font,
Bolded
yes.
black font, excuse me, thank you.
Yes.
I think we should be moving forward with that, with this red font being your potential suggested, a potential suggested edit in light of what your feedback you received at the last meeting was.
To
So that-
restrict it further.
Yeah, so that we start with the bold, which is up, and we can, if the commission so choose, restrict it in such a way that's not the same as the red. I don't think we'll get into much trouble.
I agree.
Okay, everybody kind of understand that? All right. Commissioner Porcello.
Just one question. I think I get the intent of the new edition, and I think it needs to be cleaned up a bit because its wording is not great. Like run-on sentence there. So, but
Lawyers are the king of run-on sentences. But yes.
So I think what you're trying to say is, in situations where there are multiple walls on a building that are visible from Merritt Parkway.
Correct.
One of them, the one that has the smallest area, can get a sign. I think,
Right.
I don't know.
We can work on it, yeah.
yeah,
but
So
that's-
as long as that's
that's
as long as
the-
that's the purpose.
That's the
Right.
suggestion.
If you have a 3,000 square foot wall area and you have a 5,000 square foot wall area, it can only be on the one that's 3,000 square feet that faces the Merritt.
That's what I thought you meant, just wanted to make sure.
Questions just kind of limited to this? We'll have a rebuttal, but I wouldn't mind going to public comments and then going to rebuttal, and we can talk about anything in rebuttal. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm looking at your page 6 of 10. Do you wanna?
I don't think I have this digitally, right?
Not this, but.
No, the initial presentation.
Oh, we were talking about the
Kathy wants to do it.
hardware.
The shop drawings.
Mhm.
Can you just,
Oh, it's a good one.
it's,
Yep.
the dimensions aren't clearly called out on it. Can you,
Right, well,
could you just, tell us how that corresponds to proposed regulation?
so on that's being pulled up there, so. You can see that, again, this is a hypothetical, but, the way the signs are measured under your regulation, this is considered a single wall sign, but the way you do that is a rectangle is drawn from the very outer limits. So for instance, it runs, the bottom of the rectangle runs along healthcare, and then under where it says Memorial Sloan Kettering Center, then it goes up, and it has to go as high to include what's the top part of this sign, which is the logo. And then it runs across. So on this side, what you can see, it's, I don't know, online if you could highlight that, but there's an area up there where it says HHC and MSKOA, and then it calls out the height there. So it's 92 and 5/8 inch height, and then 518 inches width. So
Which
while
sheet
it's
is-
considered one
What
sign,
is that, Emmeline?
sorry.
You want me to make it bigger?
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Right here.
So when you make a calculation, you have a sign set up like that. This area in between Hartford Healthcare and Memorial Sloan Kettering, that what is actual wall area gets counted by the way you've laid out the sign. So that's incorporated in the 350 square feet cap. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're just dimensions, if you scroll down.
I think he was asking about the dimensions of the wall.
Yeah, the dimensions, Emmeline, if you scroll down, the dimensions here don't correspond to anything. So that's just what's confusing to get to the dimensions you have up above. So I'm just,
Yeah, I think so. This measurement down here on the left is to the bar that I think is
Right.
holding it, right? So
But
it's
it doesn't-
not, that's not how you would calculate the size.
no, I know, but then you just have numbers up above, and I just want to make sure that the numbers you have on the drawings correspond with the numbers you have called out. It just, there's no way to check it without scaling it.
Let me
So
ask you this. This is just a regulation amendment.
Correct.
Should we grant it? You would have to come back to us with a compliance anyway.
100%.
yeah, I'm just trying to understand
right.
how, so right now what we're seeing complies with your regulation amendment. I mean, I can't check it without getting my scale out. That's my concern.
Right, well, and the thing is if it didn't, it would have to now comply with whatever you.
You're asking us to evaluate a drawing that doesn't have dimensions. It's not correctly called out and make a judgment on something that doesn't have. Is the image, if you go Emmeline to 5? Is basically this is what you're proposing it looks like, and I have to take your word for it because the dimensions don't correspond.
Right, it's just, right now, all it's serving as a hypothetical.
Well, how hypothetical is it? Is that what it's gonna look like?
In a separate special permit application, that's what it's gonna look like.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, what you proposed, is that depicted in this drawing?
That hypothetical is not greater than 350 square feet.
Okay.
Yes. And it does not exceed 15% of the wall area that it's presented on.
See these things as far as renderings. I mean, they're
Yeah, it's
they're
right.
gonna come to us in this kind of a fashion unless it has a companion site plan or something as precise as you would like. So
Yeah, I don't know whether it's general or whether it's accurate. And by the dimensions, it's hard for me to, it's impossible to calculate it right now.
Okay. Yeah, well, when somebody comes in with a special permit application on it, they would have to show that it was under 350 square feet.
But just to clarify, this generally complies with what you proposed.
Correct. This is an accurate hypothetical. Yes.
Thanks.
Is there a red line that you've provided in a handout? Could that possibly be shown?
public hearing, so you can jump in.
We don't have it digitally.
Yeah, sure.
We don't have that digitally.
I'm sorry.
She's asking if we can show this. We don't have.
We don't have it digitally, unless we can zoom in on it.
I can send it to her.
It doesn't
Or
look like
take a
it
picture and
changed.
send it to her. We're gonna take a picture and send it to you.
Yeah, can you just verbally tell me what changed from last time? It's still 300, it's still 15%.
Wanna make it, Mr. Braun, let us send you a picture. It's harder to,
Tell her I'm sending it to her.
we're gonna send it to you right now. It's just harder.
It just
to-
puts a total cap on the overall area,
Is it 350 or?
350 square feet.
So in other words, if you had a much bigger building in a business district, it would still not be able to get, it would not be able to do 15%. It would have to do, it would be no bigger than what you're showing us here. That's around 350.
Well, it could be 15% of the wall area. And but it could not exceed in total 350 square feet. Is that what you're asking?
It's the cap, yeah.
That is a cap.
It's either 15% or 350 square feet, whichever is less.
I mean,
Is that what,
yeah,
did I say that right?
yes.
So that's the only change from,
Well, let us send it to you because
Anybody else?
okay.
oh, anybody else besides Kath? I don't think so. Oh, Steve, if you have.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I will say, and I offer this as a possible further restriction. And again, I think this goes back to some of the comments that Commissioner Randolph made last time. And the concern was if some tenant who maybe isn't thought of right at the moment came into the building and put up a sign, what are we getting? I think this commission could also consider a further restriction that this type of sign be permitted just for a medical clinic use, which I think is what this is under. And, I think that fits within your planning discretion. I understand that limits it very specifically. But the thing I will say about one of the properties and one of the sites here that would be affected by this amendment is that I think it's a very different use than your typical retail use. It is more of a regional destination than your typical other commercial use. So if you're, okay, I was just gonna say that is, if you live in Bethel, you're not coming down to Fairfield to go to Chipotle. right? And if you live in Danbury, you're not coming down to Fairfield to go to Staples. But a medical clinic use is a much more different type of regional use, that somebody from Bethel, somebody from Danbury may be coming down for treatment. And so, I put that as a possible restriction that you could consider to limit this even further if the commission felt that was necessary.
Commissioner Siebert?
I don't know if this is possible, but I'm driving up the Merritt Parkway, Greenwich. I'm approaching exit 45. Is it possible for you to provide a visual as to relative to the Hi-Ho Motel and your proposed sign, what that might look like? Is that, I mean, maybe it's unreasonable for me to ask that, but I'm just curious as to what that might look like.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, there's some videos that were posted today that will likely be shown.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I know Attorney Green's gonna go through those videos, and I'll respond and comment on them as well. Cause I think some of this language you're considering as well,
With these modifications.
with these modifications, I think will be pertinent when you view that video, and so I'd like
Okay,
to respond
thank
to it, but I'll let that Attorney Green provide that video, so I'll let him
Some
introduce it.
pictures as well as.
Okay,
on
all right,
that
thank
side,
you.
I mean. Let me move to public comments. Maybe he'll have chime for rebuttal if anything else comes up. Or you want it for. Anything further?
Nothing.
Let's move to public comments. Close the initial presentation portion of this application. Does any member of the public wish to be heard on this item? Zoning regulation amendment application of Fairfield Medical LLC. Attorney Green, I know you're up. Just out of curiosity, is anybody else here for this, or are there anybody else here for Shapiro, the next one?
I have Wes Haynes, who I think is
He's with
with you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to get a sense if that's all. Commissioner, Attorney Green, come on up. I need to insult you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission staff. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. It's my pleasure to appear before you this evening on behalf of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, who for decades has been dedicated to preserving the historic character and appearance of the Merritt Parkway. With me this evening is Wes Haynes, who's the executive director of the Conservancy, and he is online and couldn't be here live this evening. We are here to urge the commission to deny this application, and I will, and first and foremost, I want to thank the commission for your generous courtesy in continuing this matter to this evening, because I had a hearing in Trumbull, and I was online as long as I could be last Tuesday, but I just couldn't stay on any longer. So thank you for that. So once again, we believe that this application should be denied by the commission because there really is no reason under the Connecticut general statutes or really based on the history of this site to grant it. The Merritt Parkway was planned in the early 1930s as a parkway, and one of the essential features of the Merritt Parkway was that it would not have any billboards. And consistent with not having any billboards, there was a statute enacted by the Connecticut State Legislature, 13A 123, that in fact prohibits billboards within 660 feet of limited highway right-of-ways. It's been amended from time to time and now includes other public ways as well. But it's always been meant to be a parkway. So I'm going to, as I had indicated to Mr. Wenton in my letters, in my letter to you, I'm going to try to move very quickly, and I'm not going to take up a lot of the commission's time tonight. I just saw this amendment when you did, and I haven't had a really good chance to to really think about it. But what strikes me initially and is that the applicant proposes to add a limitation of 350 square feet. So the applicant is first allowing you, and you had passed a regulation saying, we're not going to allow signage facing the Merritt Parkway either, because we recognize the historic significance and preserving the character of the parkway. So this commission had passed a regulation recognizing that. So not only is this applicant asking you to waive that regulation, essentially amend it and allow signs that essentially face the Merritt Parkway, but they are proposing now to put a limitation of 350 feet on the size of the sign. Now, you all know what the proximity is because you've all driven down the Merritt Parkway and you can see where that building is. So the applicant is now proposing that they could have a sign with 5-foot high letters that is 70 feet tall on that face of the building. Why would you possibly need a sign that large for that building? First of all, and there's so many features of this application that the proposal is really just completely unnecessary. When you drive up Black Rock Turnpike, there is not a lot of confusion as to where you are between the Hartford Healthcare Building and the Hi-Ho. There's 2 commercial buildings there, and the building is close to Black Rock Turnpike. So anyone looking for that building, no one is getting lost coming north or south on Black Rock Turnpike as you approach that building. Similarly, so there's no confusion. So the sign doesn't help drivers on the road to find the building. That's easy. Similarly, when you drive down the Merritt Parkway, and I'm going to show videos shortly, but when you are southbound on the Merritt Parkway, first of all, you can see the building, but by the time you see that building, you're already by the exit. So you're not getting off the highway at that point. You're going into no man's land up to the next Westport exit 5 miles away. Similarly, when you're coming northbound, by the time you see the building, you're not getting off the parkway there. So the only conceivable purpose of this sign is exactly what is prohibited. The whole purpose of this sign is to promote the marketing of Hartford Healthcare. That's it. And I would suggest to the commission that under section 8-2, which governs the adoption of zoning regulations and the amendment of zoning regulations, there's no basis within 8-2. There's no recognized purpose in the legislation that enables this commission to adopt regulations, to adopt a regulation for this purpose that's proposed. So let me go just quickly. You're familiar with what the applicant is proposing by now, and so I won't go through the small portions of the amendment again, because you appear to be very familiar with that. Now, first of all, the Merritt Parkway is a historic icon. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's designated as a Connecticut Scenic Highway, and it's designated as a National Scenic Byway. The Merritt Parkway Conservancy has been working hard to preserve the historic landscape and character. Now, the applicant showed slides of these breaches in sort of this park and this forest setting. Now, first of all, the Merritt Parkway is 39 miles long. It ends at the Housatonic River. So there were these pictures that were shown of the approach to the tunnels in New Haven coming down the hill. There were pictures, I think, of an auto dealer sign or auto dealership in Wallingford. That is not the Merritt Parkway.
Yeah, we were talking about that. I seem to recall though, when we were doing the initial building,
Correct. Correct.
The building itself, both of them actually, the medical and the 830G. I thought we went up the line into Wilbur Cross.
Correct.
We did.
The applicant did.
Well, the applicant did, yeah, but I thought we were all doing it because that was the Merritt Parkway.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get to that in a moment.
Okay.
But you are correct, and that was not accurate.
Okay, because I mean, as far as I recall, the National Registry, it went all the way up to, I mean, as far as when it stops.
It-
Into Wilbur Cross, the Merritt Park.
Well,
wasn't
it
just-
stops at I-91 in Middletown, technically
Yeah.
Route 15, but the Merritt Parkway that's within the Conservancy, ends at the line between Stratford and Milford.
Is that just because of the Conservancy, or is that because it's not registered as the highway, the protected highway?
That portion of the highway was the original in 1930, when the
Okay.
highway was conceived. That was the portion that was the Merritt Parkway.
I mean, I know the applicant went up the line into the Wilbur Cross.
did.
I thought
You were.
everybody, but I thought we were all up there too.
You were,
We
you
were
were.
all kind of agreeing or under the impression that that was part of the Merritt Parkway.
You are absolutely correct with that, in terms of your recollection.
No, but not just the applicant, but even the Conservancy was accepting the fact that we were going into Wilbur Cross, what is now Wilbur Cross, or whenever it became Wilbur Cross. That's not the case.
That's not my understanding.
That's fine. That's why I'm asking.
So, yes, there are some breaches in the Park Lake setting. And we are working on that. They include, continue to work with DOT on the Merit 7 project. That is an area of great concern. You may recall that we appeared before this commission on the Park Avenue building. That's 5545 Park Avenue. We worked on that project and negotiated with the applicant to create a robust landscape buffer and to change the appearance of the building, to mute the appearance of the building so that it would not be as visible from the parkway. And I note that a lot of those plantings are in now. We look forward to them growing tall and to not seeing that building. There are areas that we can't control. For example, when you come down the hill where Sikorsky is, there's only so much you can do when there's an ascent on the highway. But the big point is, we're talking about 4 or 5 instances in 39 miles where there are maybe what I'll call significant breaches of the viewscape from the parkway. And here the applicant is basically asking you to create another breach in the viewscape, and we're urging you not to do that. Now, you may recall, and as you, Mr. Chairman, have referenced, the applicant appeared before you for a 94-unit affordable housing development originally that was 154,000 square foot building that was 70 feet tall and had 139 parking spaces. That application was ultimately approved. We appealed there was an appeal of the application. And through that appeal process, and during that appeal process, the owner of the property came forward with this Hartford healthcare plan. Which
I thought it was medical first and then 830G.
it was originally a medical building, that is correct.
Okay.
And then the site was reconfigured and the 8-30G application
And then Hartford
was.
came in, okay.
And the case of Ronan versus Planning and Zoning Commission, in the course of that, we entered into discussions with the applicant. The applicant had an opportunity for this medical building. And in fact, my client entered into negotiations with the applicant, including landscaping and those sort of features. Now, the thing that I just wanted to get into with the commission is that in the course of the hearing on the affordable housing development, the applicant produced a landscape architect named Jason Williams. And I just want to share with you a bit of his testimony, which I think would be of interest to the commission, because he appeared on March 21, 2021 before the commission. And he said the following on March 23rd with respect to the affordable housing application. It said, so starting northbound as we're heading down the hill to Merritt Parkway, you really only have one view possibly that you'd be able to see the site. And it's trying to peek through down the on-ramp. As you're crossing over the bridge of 58, you have another view, and then heading southbound, you have potential for another view to the site. Let's start northbound. as you're heading down the parkway, you really have one opportunity as you're moving, whether sitting in traffic or flying down the Merritt Parkway at 75 miles an hour, to get a glimpse of the building. Over on the right here, you can see the immense amount of vegetation that obscures the site, which is back in this area here. Heading southbound, just coming again, down before you get off exit 44, the existing buffer between the off-ramp going down to 58 and the Merritt Parkway provides an immense amount of screening. Not only are there oaks, which you know deciduous foliage, but oaks keep their leaves on late into the fall, but there are eastern white pines within this area as well. As you know, coming off of exit 44 doesn't lead you right to 58. You then have to take a left to get down to 58. So northbound, southbound, approaching the area, there's no way you're going to see our site. But there is one location where you will be able to see the site, and that is as you're heading southbound, approaching the existing overpass. You'll be provided a glimpse potentially of the building. Now, that being said, the image on the left is what the user experience of the driveway is. The driver's heading southbound, and this is the part that I really was building up to. The driver's heading southbound at a minimum of 55 miles per hour. Moving over this bridge span of 50 feet, the driver has 0.62 seconds. So under 1 second of peripheral vision that they're able to catch a glimpse of the proposed development. Because as you can see here, we've got really thick brush and small trees that are growing and hanging over into this area. The only way that you would be able to see this view is if you got out of your car and walked on this bridge and stood looking north, you would see a clear view. But we know that based on Merritt Parkway, there would be no pedestrian ever over on this side of the bridge. So when the applicant appeared before this commission, this owner and their landscape architect said, you'd only be able to see the site for 0.6, a little over half a second when you drive by the site. That's the only time you'll see and that building was 70 feet tall. And I think this building is like 25 feet tall. And he said, you'd only see the building for a little over half a second. So I presented some videos. Can we play those videos? Because after this, we negotiated with this applicant and agreed to withdraw the appeal. We stipulated, and in reliance on that, and here is a video that shows, this is the northbound view. This is good. So. And that's just, there's just a few extra seconds here. And then the southbound view. And here is approaching the entrance. And you can see here that you can readily see the building at several points. And this is a little bit balky with the video, but you can, if you watch the video on your system directly, you can basically see the building throughout, through the trees in the wintertime. And if you had 350 feet of illuminated signage at night, you're basically absolutely going to see that sign from the Merritt Parkway throughout your traverse as you go by the site. The applicant has directed this whole amendment is designed by the applicant's own admission to benefit one single property. Once again, there is no need for it. My client also had pointed out to me that even Trumbull Shopping Park, the landscaping as you pass that has gotten somewhat thin, but there are no backlit signs, and the Trumbull Shopping Park was not allowed to put a sign up along the parkway, for example. And there's new housing that you can presently see somewhat from the Merritt Parkway at the Trumbull Shopping Park. And we are working at present with Trumbull Shopping Park and the Department of Transportation to address that right now. So we believe that the proposed sign would impose upon the historic character. It's not at all necessary. Certainly, it was not something, and when we negotiated for the landscaping and the site landscaping that was to be permitted with respect to this medical building, we actually got into the kind of trees that would be planted in order to assure that the building site would be visually buffered from the Merritt Parkway. That is, that you can't see it. And the right of way of the Merritt Parkway does touch this site. And we are, confident that when the applicant gets into the later phases of this project on the building, that they will put up the landscaping that we had agreed to and the trees that we had agreed to. But allowing the applicant to put signs now in locations on the building that we never agreed to, first of all, we feel is unjust. But we also feel that it violates, just once again, the whole notion of preserving the parkway. Give me one moment.
As far as the agreement you had, it's not as if they haven't done it yet. They haven't gotten to it yet,
They haven't gotten to it
which is
yet.
fine.
I know, but what was the point of negotiating a certain blend of trees with a landscape architect if now the sign is going to be in another location and high up on the building using a potential area of the sign that is 5 times larger than we ever contemplated? So
Depending on what they use, I assume they're gonna be using potentially arborvitaes that don't lose their leaves in the winter. For the extra buffer.
well, then what is the point of having up to 350 feet of signage facing a stand of arborvitae so that you can have a gigantic sign?
Well, I guess that's a double-edged sword, I guess, argument, because, either what's the point of it, or it doesn't harm anything. So it's like, that's a double-edged sword argument that maybe doesn't hold up well with the regulation amendment standards to begin with, but.
I had submitted some pictures of the property from Black Rock Turnpike, and we can show those.
But just, to finish my thought though, your point's well taken on the agreement, but as far as the signage, it didn't really address signage. It was just the information that, the regulations at the time, well, even now, call for a certain sign, and we didn't address signage in that agreement.
So that's our problem, I suppose, but not
No,
the
it's not.
commission's problem. But I'm just
No.
pointing out,
I'm just saying, as long as there's nothing that is touching on, that nothing touches signage in your agreement. That's what I just wanted to make sure of.
well, I guess this just goes back to what possible reason would you need the type and size of signage from this is on as you get off 44. Can we go to the next picture as well? And the next picture. The only possible reason is to effectively create a billboard on the building. That's the only point. It doesn't serve as a guide, people. It just serves as a marketing tool. And I don't recall what the mix of trees were, to your point, Mr. Chairman, but it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is, I think that this commission should decline to start amending zoning regulations on a case-by-case basis, because the next good cause may show up on I-95, some near the right of way, and say, hey, we want a giant sign, just like Hartford Healthcare got up at the Merritt, and why aren't we getting the same benefit? And another thing that I think that the applicant had suggested in its statement and in its presentation is something about the hi-ho sign. So the hi-ho sign is a non-conforming sign. It is admittedly, and I think as the applicant has conceded, it is sort of an iconic situation, and it's, as someone pointed out to me, it's still pretty bad looking, but it's iconic and we're all used to it by now. And it's kind of comforting when you see it. And I think it is true. When it was down, everyone was wondering if something cataclysmic had happened. But that is another that's of no moment to the commission. It really, it doesn't on any basis justify granting the application here. And then the applicant is talking about other buildings in Fairfield that have upper story signage. Show me another building on the Merritt Parkway that has upper story signage. None of them do. So I won't take up any more of your time, but there's,
I think to be fair, he did show somebody in Norwalk.
I'm saying in Fairfield.
Well, I know, yeah.
I don't know what the Norwalk regulation is. Look, we're doing our best, and I can assure you, and Mr. Haynes can assure you that they work really hard to preserve the integrity of the parkway. And you know, it's a nonprofit, it's a historic preservation organization, and they work really hard at it. And it's just, it's a real problem. But we urge the commission, you have jurisdiction here, not in this instance to do something that once again is just for commercial benefit of one property owner. I don't know, Mr. Haynes, I don't know if you had any comments you wanted to offer in the context of my presentation.
Yes, thank you, Attorney Green. I'd just like to also thank the commission for rolling this over to tonight so that we could present here. And to clarify that the Merritt Parkway is on the National Register. The Wilbur Cross is not part of the National Register. It's been administered with a much lighter hand. They were both, one was sequential to the other. The Wilbur Cross was added onto after the Merritt. And the Merritt was so controversial when it was first proposed that the reason it was created the way it looks today as a parkway is because that was the only way the state could build this road through Fairfield County. People feared another junky road filled with billboards. Binney Kitchell was the state assemblywoman who got the appropriation from the state. She was an environmentalist, and she led the campaign, the anti-billboard campaign, for good roads. There was a good roads movement in Connecticut. She lost her seat. The billboard industry, paid for a candidate to run against her and got her out of office. The anti-billboard idea is embedded within the very fundamental idea of the Merritt Parkway and the significance of the parkway. And we don't see this as a necessary sign for an emergency facility. This is really just a billboard disguised as a sign on a building. So we acknowledge that there are incursions into the parkway in Norwalk. Norwalk does not have an ordinance like Fairfield has against billboards facing the parkway. We consider Fairfield's ordinance to be both enlightened and effective, and we don't want to see it weakened. We see it as a model for other municipalities, and in fact, we often cite it when we talk to leadership in other communities, requesting that they consider that too. It was mentioned earlier that Stamford was a possible area where billboards intrude on the parkway. They don't. Stamford is a much more dense city than Fairfield is, and there's a lot of commercial development tucked behind those trees there, but there are no billboards that face the Merritt Parkway. So I don't see why. I agree with Attorney Russo when he said that this is one of the least interrupted parts of the parkway. I don't see that as a compelling reason to introduce a billboard here, a backlit sign that's going to be in everybody's face. So I really strongly urge you to turn this down, to keep your ordinance intact, and keep it as a model for us to get spread elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Experience.
Hey, Wes, could you briefly describe your education, training, and experience?
Sure. My am I muted?
No?
Okay. My background, I have a degree from Columbia Architecture School in Historic Preservation. I've been in the field for 50 years, practicing historic preservation in many capacities, working for nonprofits and private architectural firms. It's been my privilege to be the executive director of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy and to be its protector. I grew up driving the Merritt between Stamford and Fairfield to high school. I love the road very dearly, and I want to see it transformed to the state that we've gotten it to for the enjoyment of the next generation. We've just completed a 25-year corridor safety improvement project done in phases. The Jersey barriers are all away. The parkway hasn't looked this good since about 1940, and we want to keep it that way.
And since we've just set the table, based on your education, training, and experience, is it your professional opinion that the sign as it is proposed, or well, as it has been shown, would adversely impact upon the historic character of the Merritt Parkway?
Yes, it is my opinion that this sign will intrude and be an adverse impact on the parkway.
With that, I have nothing further. If there are any questions, and I also should say that this is not. We wish Hartford Healthcare well, and we hope that this facility thrives. We appreciate the efforts of the owner, and this was a cooperative effort. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, you know, we really had, I think, what turned out to be a win-win for the owner and for the community, and that this is a facility that is needed and is well positioned. And we do wish them well, but once again, just the amendment is not necessary. So with all due respect, we respectfully request that the commission deny the application.
Questions for Attorney Green?
I have
Randolph, and then Ron.
Oh, Mr. Green, and I'm sorry, who's your colleague?
Wes
Sorry,
Haynes.
Mr. Haynes, have you studied the monument sign package?
I didn't quite catch the question.
There's within the submission, there is some renderings of monument signs that are outside the entryway. And on the north side of the building, going up Black Rock Turnpike.
I saw them.
Did you see, Mr. Haynes?
I didn't see. I didn't see the monument signs. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just asking, in your professional opinion, can we get the monument sign up, perhaps? It's in the package. It's
It's in the rendering package?
yes.
Oh, there it is. Got it.
Thank you, Ms. Hargan.
And then there's a rendering of the north side of the building. Yeah, so there's the monument sign. I'll give you a minute to take a look at that. I think there's a location plan for that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the sign that's at the entrance.
Yes.
Correct.
And then
Yes.
there's a rendering of the north side of the building. Yeah, right there. So in your professional opinion, would those signs in themselves provide enough orientation for people who were trying to find their way into the building?
Oh, yes, I believe that they would. I didn't understand the question about the monument sign at first, but we have no objection to that sign or the north facing sign, and they would identify the building for anyone, as Attorney Russo said, was coming down from Bethel to use the facility.
And as Mr. Haynes had indicated, this is not an emergency care facility. This is, sort of an outpatient. It's a medical office. So anyone looking for this site knows that it's at an address on Black Rock Turnpike. And once again, if you get to that place by the parkway, there's two choices. There's the High Hope and there's Hartford Healthcare. So those signs are adequate as far as.
So you have no objections to those signs?
No.
Okay,
That's correct.
okay, thanks.
Could you put up that picture again of the other signs? I want to understand the orientation of them. The most recent picture you showed, is that the one, does that face directly at the Hi-Ho? Like directly across Black Rock Turnpike? I don't see the sign.
No,
It's perpendicular to the face of the Hi-Ho building. It sits at the entryway so that traffic moving on Black Rock Turnpike would see it as they approach the driveway.
Wait, could you show me that sign again? Yeah, so,
This one?
No, if you had it, you had it.
where does this face?
Faces.
away from the mirror, north.
It faces up Black Rock Turnpike?
Faces the parking lot, away from the mirror, up the hill.
Okay. So if you're coming down the hill, you'd see that. And then there's another sign. Oh, that's
That other sign is at the driveway on Black Rock Turnpike. So you see the face of it and a side view.
Okay. And would that sign be lit up, the one facing up the Black Rock Turnpike? Would that, I'm worried about dark skies compliant.
Well, let's talk to the applicant about that, because I think the regulation amendments he's proposing really don't address or
Says,
impact the monument sign.
says illuminated monument, double-sided.
And
So
where,
let's-
could you show me the monument sign? Is there a rendering of that?
Right.
It's on the screen.
Oh,
Yeah, that's not what the regulation amendment is, so.
okay. So that would, yeah, okay.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
just my question was, the rationale was that the sign in question facing the Merritt was for orientation for people to find their way to the building, but your expert said that the signs on the north facing the parking lot and the monument sign adequately provided.
Go finish your thought.
I'm sorry.
No, I mean, be mindful. I mean, he's here as an expert for the architecture and the historical integrity of their parkway. He's not, I guess, proffered as an expert for whether signs are sufficient to be seen by
So
people.
29.10.1 refers to signs on the building face. So it doesn't deal with the monument sign. And the other regulation in play deals with signs facing the Merritt Parkway. So the sign that's on the building facing on the north side of the building faces away from the Merritt Parkway, so it could never be seen from the parkway. And the other sign is a monument sign that's not regulated under this section.
You would agree with me, though. Commissioner Randolph's question is fair as far as being able to be seen. But as far as like the north, the signs facing north, Mr. Haynes's opinion is not really an expert opinion as far as whether they're visible.
No,
It's his own
and-
personal opinion.
And also, look, our main focus here is signs that are visible from
Yeah,
the.
no, I
Merritt
get
Parkway.
that.
So,
Gotcha.
so, you know,
Final questions?
I have a question on, so right now, this only applies to, this is the only business district that has a commercial building facing the Merritt Parkway, I guess.
the
I'm
current,
sorry.
the current 29.8.2 prohibits the installation of signs on properties that are visible from the Connecticut Turnpike or the Merritt Parkway. And in this case, the applicant is asking it to be waived as it pertains to the Merritt Parkway if the property is located in a designed commercial district. So,
Just this pocket between.
so it's
yeah.
just this one property, which
Oh.
was rezoned, by the way, to designed commercial in the course of those.
This and the Hi-Ho and two commercial properties next to each other.
Correct.
Across the street from each other.
But Trumbull Shopping Park is commercial, right?
That's in Trumbull, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So is it, if we did create another design commercial district somewhere, say between here and Bridgeport, Park Avenue, that would also, this sign regulation would apply to that too, right?
We would hope so.
Well, you would hope not.
We would hope that regulation prohibiting
Oh, I'm
signage.
sorry.
Oh, right. So this change of the regulation could allow other 350 square foot size signs that are backlit, I guess, in other places, if we ever would, add a commercial section on East, Stratfield Road, Easton Turnpike, or up on Park Avenue, I suppose.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Attorney Green.
Thank you.
Sorry, any other member of the public wish to be heard in this application? Anybody in the room?
I'm
Come up. Yep, you have the right to, if you weren't planning on it. That's
not here for that. I'm here for.
No, but that's why we do it, even if,
Well, I've learned a lot, and thank you
Yeah.
guys for your time on the commission panel. My name's Helena Coatsworth. I live at 120 Kings Drive. My thought about just seeing these design proposals is, it's very dark on the Merritt at night, and I think that's a startling brightness to come over the hill heading southbound on the Merritt Parkway. So much so, in fact, that I believe it would be a distraction to drivers, possibly creating a safety hazard. That's an enormous shock of light when you're sort of focused on the night driving. It's also unsightly, to say the least, for people just traveling and traversing the Merritt. So that's my 2 cents.
thank you. Come on up. Is there anybody in chat that's signed up that's joining us remotely? You can see,
I can double check.
I'll let, ma'am, go ahead.
I oppose this bright, huge sign. I think we're at a critical juncture in the planning for our town. Do we want to be New York City? Do we want to look like LA? Do we want to look like Stanford? And I don't think we do. And if we don't get control of it now, it's just our whole town is gonna change. It's not gonna look the same as it does now. So I agree with the lady that just spoke that it would be glaringly bright. It doesn't seem that it's oriented towards the parkway in any helpful way. And honestly, Hartford Healthcare has more problems than the signs on the side of the building. When you Google different locations, it won't, if you put in, I think it's St. Vincent's, that's a Hartford Healthcare facility now. But if you put in St. Vincent's, it won't take you to the hospital in Bridgeport. So signs on the side of the building are the least of their problems. And I would hope you would turn it down. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other member, public in person wish to be heard? Anybody joining us remotely or by phone wish to be heard in this application? Signed up. Anybody joining us remotely, in person, or by phone? If you're joining by phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Last call. Hearing and seeing no one, I'll close the public comment portion of this application and we'll go to rebuttal. Attorney Russo.
Chair, members of the commission, Chris Russo, again, on behalf of the applicant. There's really 2 buckets to this regulation. And so I just want to address the one which I think, there's a lot of discussion about the merit portion of it, but the cap on the total square footage and also the 20% of a wall area for a single tenant building. To me, that's a different bucket. And again, you might remember this from my presentation last week. You can have multiple tenants have 72 square foot signs and get this even more signage than what's being proposed with this amendment. So for instance, if a wall is 2,500 square feet, the current regulations allow 20% of the wall area to be occupied by signs. So if you take that, that's 500 square feet. Now that has to be broken up into tenants, but you can get up to, you said you could get up to 500 square feet as long as you have, in that case, it's going to make me do math, which I can't do, but it would be a number of tenants to get up to the 500 square feet, right? So if Hartford Healthcare was a tenant and Memorial Sloan Kettering was a tenant and a separate tenant, and Dr. Russo was a separate tenant, and there's 2 other doctors, then they can do 5 times 72 and get that amount, and they would not exceed 20%. So there's a part of this amendment that I think is addressing a disparity between single tenant buildings and multi-tenant buildings. We're proposing, if it's a single tenant building, that you be allowed 15% of the wall area. Whereas if you're a multi-tenant building, you can have up to 20% of the wall area, as long as you have the necessary number of tenants to, have that multiple of 72. So that I think is kind of separate from the merit issue. I think it's completely reasonable. And again, we had discussion last week about how upper story signs are something you see throughout Fairfield. So I think it's in conformity with what you see in the town. And again, it's a single tenant building, so there's no confusion. And because your POCD talks about visual clutter, well, you're not going to have multiple signs competing here. It's just one sign for one tenant. So I think it's in line with your POCD. So that's that part of it. Then there's the, and I'll just say, because Attorney Green made a couple comments about the sign design, and I wasn't so clear on what he was trying to say, but as far as the lettering goes, what we're proposing is that there be a maximum of 3 feet for the lettering, regardless of how many lines of copy there are. But we're not proposing a letter that is bigger than what you allow already. So I thought he said something like 6 or 7 feet. No, your lettering would be limited to 3 feet as it is now. It just would be allowed on both the first line of copy and the second line of copy. Whereas the regs now would say that it has to be 2 and 2. So the other thing he mentioned, the height of the building that he's referencing is only 32 feet. And this sign, unlike Hi-Ho, doesn't extend above the roof line of that. So, it's not that high off the ground. So again, regarding the merit, I think, and we talked about this last week, the commission, the town has been, I think, very responsible and sensitive to protecting the Merritt Parkway area. There is not a lot of commercial district along the Merritt Parkway. There is only these 2 properties. So it's a very limited incursion. There is examples along the Merritt, and we can limit it down from Greenwich to Milford. But there's multiple examples of signage along the Merritt in both cities and towns. There is, if you're in Stamford, near Long Ridge Road, there is where it goes over Long Ridge Road, there's a William Ravis sign that's visible. On High Ridge Road, there's a Chipotle that's visible. In Norwalk, there's the Merritt View sign. In Westport Weston, there's a sign, it's a small sign, but there is a sign that faces the Merritt for the Y. Hi-Ho, obviously in Fairfield, there's the mall signs, the JCPenney and the Macy's sign. And then, Attorney Green was talking about signs of comparable size. There's a Sikorsky sign, which is huge. And Stratford is a town, by the way. I looked that up because, but it is a town. But there's a Sikorsky sign, which is obviously a very large sign. And so I think Attorney Green's making some of the argument that I have here is that this is a very limited incursion into allowing signage along the Merritt Parkway Conservancy. The Merritt Parkway, I should say. And the funny thing about the video, if you look at the video and you watch it, everybody in their mind can picture the Hi-Ho sign. If I tell you to visualize the Hi-Ho motel sign, you can visualize it. But when you look at that video, you actually only see it for a very, very short time. You don't really see it too much when you're heading northbound, and you see it for a brief glimpse when you're heading southbound. But what happens is you build a familiarity with where it is. You've seen it coming off the highway enough. You've seen it enough time. You know exactly where the Hi-Ho is and where to go. And that is something that that we believe this signage is going to achieve. It's not necessarily that you see it and then you're like, all right, I got to quickly get off the highway. But it's that people are going to know, okay, that's where the Hartford Healthcare building is. And more importantly, this building is special because of its partnership with Memorial Sloan Kettering. And that this is going to be the building where people are going for that specific type of treatment. Hartford Healthcare is the only care partner in the area with Memorial Sloan Kettering. So it's going to be a regional destination. This is going to be a place where the leading edge of cancer treatment is going to be offered. And because of that, there are going to be people that come from the area and they're going to drive by it as they drive through the Merritt, and they're going to get familiarity with it. And we think this is a very reasonable size, and it is the lettering abides by your signage regs as far as the channel lettering. It's recessed in, it's LED, it's it's confined, so there isn't spillage, but it is enough, even though it's 0.6 seconds, as Joel Green or Attorney Green pointed out, but it's enough to let people know it's there, and that's where it is, and build familiarity that this is the location to go. I will also comment, there was comments about the previous agreements and regarding landscaping there at that site. I didn't handle that portion of it, but I do know that there is a state portion of property in between the site, my understanding, between the site and the Merritt, and that the state didn't want landscaping there. This is what I was told by my client, that they didn't want additional landscaping there. And then when they made their agreement, signage was not a part of that agreement. So that's all I know. I was not a party to that.
I mean, to be fair though, I mean, when we had the medical building application, when Hartford Healthcare came in, even when Sloan Kettering was partnering with them, everybody knew what the sign regulations were.
Mhm.
So it's not like we're doing anything different. They've been there for ages. We all know that that's what, at least now, that everybody's at least Hartford Healthcare is entitled to. So it's no surprise in that respect. I mean, you, like every other, applicant or potential applicant, has the right to do a zoning regulation with us, and we'll consider it. But it's not as if these current zoning regulations weren't known to everybody as they were doing the project, or, getting the lease going, getting the partnership going. I mean, this is all kind of known to everybody. I assume this isn't gonna be a massively detrimental thing if the zoning regulations stay the same.
And the regulations were in place at the time. I will say most applicants that come in with new developments usually push the sign portion of it to later, because the big,
That's
big,
fine,
you
but
know,
I mean,
and
I trust you because you're more the practitioner than I am. But obviously that carries the risk of, okay.
yeah, and I don't think the deal was contingent on being able to get the sign, right? That the important thing is to be able to get the building. But I
Not
think
like we didn't know about the Merritt Parkway Conservancy.
100%.
Yeah.
But looking at that, because we were talking about the monument sign and that sign, the signage that is allowed there, a lot of it is on the north side of the building, facing north. So really, it's only visible to people who are coming south on Black Rock Turnpike. And for people who are coming from the Merritt, or people who are coming north on Black Rock Turnpike, you won't see that signage that's on the back. You see the monument sign, but again, to me, there's a lot of Hartford healthcare buildings. I think this one's going to stand out as an odd one in that it doesn't have signage. I think that might actually throw people, that this doesn't have the signage that you come to expect at a Hartford healthcare building. And I think, again, it's a reasonable request. We've tried to limit it. I've proposed
Gotcha. I think-
additional limiting
No,
language
I think
to
we,
try to confine this, to stay respectful of the Conservancy. We don't want a sign, that's facing directly parallel to the Merritt. We have an opportunity with a wall that is offset to place signage where we think we could be discreet about it, but still let people know and build familiarity that it's there.
thank you. I think unless you have some final thoughts.
That's it, Chair.
Any final thoughts or questions?
I have a question. I have three questions. Can you, I'm trying to understand the first section of the amendment. You just mentioned that Attorney Green said that it would be 5 or 6 feet tall, but I'm sorry, I think this is the second section, where it says,
Right.
you crossed out where the limit, it's 29.10.1. Currently it reads, no figure device shall exceed 3 feet for a single line of copy or 2 feet for multiple lines of copy. You crossed out 2 feet for multiple lines of copy, but you have multiple lines of copy, right? So doesn't that mean you could have 2 3-foot tall lines of copy?
Right, and I don't know if that's what Attorney Green was stating, is that if you stacked them up, it would be 3 and 3, so it would be 6 feet. But I just wanted to make clear, we're not increasing, there's not gonna be lettering here that is above any lettering that's currently allowed. It's just allowing 3 feet for multiple lines of copy. There's no single letter that's gonna be more than 3 feet. And our argument last week, about that was, that's essentially to whoever's proposing the sign, right? If they want to use their permitted signage area, with lettering that's 3 feet, it's gonna eat into more of their signage area, but that they be given that discretion to do so. And, we have an overall cap here, so all right, they might be using 3-foot lettering throughout, but they're not gonna exceed this size
But
overall.
you're taking away the limitation for multiple lines. Does that mean you could have 3 feet for per each line for 2 lines of copy?
Right, so like Hartford could be 3 feet and healthcare could be 3 feet.
Right. So that's allowed right now. Maybe you don't have it that way, but that would be allowed on the next tenant of the building, or if another building in another design business district had a similar size building, I guess, right? It would not be limited to one 3-foot high series of letters. It could be 2 3-foot high series, 2 lines with 3-foot high each, right? Is there a limit on that? It doesn't seem like there's a limit on that,
Well, the limit is the overall signage area.
but that's 350 square feet. That's pretty big.
On a single tenant building that contains multiple stories.
Yeah, and then, okay, so that's one question. It all depends on how you configure. You could have instead of a long, narrow one that goes sideways, you could have like more of a vertical one that has a lot of height, it could be configured different way, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the next question is, in the first regulation you're changing, it currently just says you cannot have a sign facing the Merritt or the Connecticut Turnpike. Then you first added, except for lots which abut the right of way or access of the Merritt and are located within a design commercial district. Then tonight you just added, a single wall sign shall be permitted on the wall with the smallest amount of area which faces the Merritt Parkway, and all other wall signs shall not be visible from the Merritt Parkway. But how can you have 2 walls that face the Merritt Parkway? The comma is there, but I
Well,
don't understand that.
Well, if you take the Hartford Healthcare building, for example, there's one wall that is parallel with the Merritt, and then there's an angled offset wall that also faces the Merritt. So what that distinction is making is that you would have to choose the wall that was the smallest area. of
Okay.
the-
Okay, so conceivably there could be 2 walls that face the Merritt Parkway.
For the Hartford Healthcare building, there are 2 walls.
Okay. And the last question, we just talked about this on another matter earlier tonight. When you change a proposed regulation text amendment that's been given public notice, sorry, I can't turn it off. If you change, don't we have to have another public hearing, because the public notice had the prior verbiage, and now you changed it tonight. You gave a handout. How does that work in your
Commissioner
opinion?
Braun, that's what I was clearing up in the beginning. The application is on the amendments to the current application are the bolded black language. But after the first hearing last week, with, I think, Commissioner Randolph kind of leading that discussion a bit, Attorney Russo has provided us potential suggested edits that would address Commissioner Randolph's concern, but the application is still only the bolded black language.
So if we take these changes, we have to then put another public notice out with the item that we wish to adopt, right?
No, this is even if we were to, if we hypothetically were to accept the red language, and since it is restricting the regulation further, we would not need to reopen it. It would be if we somehow, instead of it being may occupy up to 15%, we said 20%, then we would have, that would be expanding the draft regulation amendment, then we would need a new hearing.
I guess I don't know the law on that. It seems like that could be a legal issue that we're modifying the language that was put out to public notice, pretty significantly, but even though it seems to make it better.
Well, Commissioner Braun, you're acting in your legislative capacity, so you're allowed as a commission to tweak this language. I mean, you're welcome to take my language exactly as it's worded, but
I
you don't
agree.
have to do that. You can tweak the wording and and that's what I think, again, this is honing it in rather than expanding it.
Well, I understand. When we act in our legislative capacity, we act with very broad discretion. We are supposed to be drafting our own regulations. Thank you for drafting it for us. But it's not that. It's the notice provision and whether the public notice adequately described what we intend to adopt. So if we intend to adopt something quite different, I've just been told on a prior application tonight that we would have to put out a new notice.
But that was
That's
proposing.
That's not what I said previously.
Okay.
I repeated what I just said is you're reining in a regulation, you don't need to. If you're expanding a regulation, at least the proposed amendment, then you would need to.
Okay.
Thank you. All set?
All set.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Commissioners. Appreciate it.
I'll close the hearing on this application. And we will turn to next item is zoning regulation amendment, application of Shapiro Commons LLC to amend section 10 of the zoning regulations regarding design residence district, section 10.6 density and minimum lot area, section 10.10 setbacks, section 10.12 coverage in bulk, section 28.6.1 off-street parking. This is continued from last December. And to the public, thank you for your patience.
Chair, again, trying to move with efficiency here.
Yeah, let me see if I can recap where we are quickly procedurally. You or Attorney Rizzio had ended the initial presentation portion. There was an issue about whether materials provided on that day require the adjournment for the public to consider. We adjourned it for that consideration. We are in public comments. I know Attorney Green is here and was reserving comments for tonight. I think we had some public comment. And then we adjourned the meeting, kept public comment open.
Correct.
Okay, so we are now, anything else further?
No, I would just think, unless you wanted me to recap where we were, I think, we could just go straight to Attorney Green.
For public,
The public, and then I can address everything at rebuttal.
I would think
Which I feel comfortable with.
I would think of considering our time, let's let the public talk, have their input. So I'll move it over to them. And you can obviously have your time rebuttal. So we are still in public comments. If anybody has spoken already, I would just say, please don't come up and repeat your comments. Again, we always take public, writing emails to us in the same way as if somebody presents it tonight. But Attorney Green, how long do you think you have?
Not that long, 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, but we would certainly defer to any.
No, I figured you would, but I wanted to give you that.
Not long, Mr. Chairman.
If I have a question for Attorney Russo, when do I ask that?
All right, members of the public, does anybody wish to be heard in this application? I'll start with anybody who's joining us
Mr. Chairman, if I have a question for Attorney Russo, when do I ask that?
during rebuttal. Remember, we're in public comment now and he'll go to rebuttal, so you'll have your opportunity. But wait a minute, Commissioner Braun, I thought you had recused yourself for this.
No, I recuse myself on a site application, not on a townwide regulation change. This is not related to any application anymore.
Recuse,
This relates to every district in our town, and it's not associated with any application.
yeah, but the last hearing, we had this regulation amendment, and I'm sorry. We had the regulation amendment and a site application, and you recused yourself from these matters.
No, I recuse myself from the site application and the zone change, but not from the text amendment. I notified Ms. Harrigan, actually in the chat that night, that I do not intend to recuse myself from a regulation that affects every residential district in our town. And that's no longer associated with any there's no application pending now. That was withdrawn. This
Well, I understand, but that's not my, well, listen, we need to talk offline because, you didn't make that qualification at the time you made your recusal. And I believe you had your brother has spoken on this matter, so.
I didn't hear him speak about it. And this is not an this is a regulation that affects every district in our town. This has nothing to do with a project that's pending. There's no project pending right now.
Well, we'll see where things pan out, but we'll have to talk offline about this. Go ahead, ma'am, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Again, my name is Helena Coatsworth. I live at 120 Kings Drive in Southport. I don't know anything about this process, but there's a large proposal at the site of 168 Kings Drive, which is on your public hearing thing for tonight. I live in the property adjacent, as do many of my neighbors here. I'm sorry, I'm very nervous.
Thank you.
I have lots of concerns. The developers want to come in and put in a bunch of different units there, which will require them to do a lot of blasting. Now, my house is 1936. I am worried about.
Yeah, we're not reviewing that particular item. This is a zoning regulation amendment.
Yeah.
For the DRDs, and it's not related to the item that was on the agenda.
There may be some confusion. The item.
No, I know, but this is partly the potential problem that we ran into last time. I mean, I'll recap it with Attorney Russo and Attorney Green, please listen, and the members of the public. We had a regulation amendments and then was it a special permit or a special exception?
It was. Both of those have been withdrawn, but as I understand this, the speaker she's referring to a matter that you've referred to public hearing, which will be the subject of a subsequent hearing that's not yet been scheduled.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Some concern, she's raising concern, if I understand, about what the application of 168 Kings Drive,
Right.
which is not the
Which we're
subject.
all here for.
I'm sorry. Okay, so let me be clear. Okay, thank you, Ms. Harrigan. I missed that completely. Okay. So 168 Kings Drive, that hearing is not being heard today. This is kind of that discussion. I know, it's even worse. I wish I had known that. I'm sorry. As we kind of discussed, when we were doing this public hearing, this is to recommend this item to a public hearing. It's the first step to kind of identify to the public that these things are coming down the pike. They are not public hearings that we are hearing tonight.
Not confusing at all.
No, I'm not, well, I'm sorry, Frank. I mean, this is just the process we've been handling it, and maybe I've fallen into the routine, so to speak, so I apologize, but this is to recommend to a future public hearing. And the items that this is not an item that we're addressing tonight.
So when would we all come back?
Well, we haven't
And-
scheduled it yet.
And how do we find out more?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So we haven't had, within the next day or two, all the materials that have been submitted will be posted on our website under pending applications. Any owner of land within 200 feet will get a direct mailing of the public hearing notice when that is scheduled. It will most likely be at the earliest sometime in March, possibly even into April.
And if we could just ask that you give us a call at the office tomorrow, and we will walk you through how to get to those files on the website.
Oh, I've been.
Excuse me, but I can't hear either one of you. I'd
Okay.
like you to raise your voices if you could.
I've been monitoring the agendas, which is why I'm here.
Right. So I understand the confusion because as the chair said, tonight's was to recognize and accept it to scheduling for public hearing, but not the
No,
actual.
I understand now.
So yes, and so apologize for that confusion.
No,
We don't know yet because there's so many things in the hopper ahead of that application of when the date certain will be, when that will be scheduled, but it will not be before March.
Will that be its 35-day beginning then? Or is that now?
65-day clock, well, the 65-day clock to begin that hearing or to, let me just say a second.
Because this is, I'd like to find more about the 830G and will this ever come to fruition? Because it's like tick-tock, tick-tock, we're waiting on that to see. So one of the big questions I have is about the timing of the proposal. They've already submitted it. That's why it's on the docket and the agenda. So how much time do we have to get a survey done ourselves and try to figure out this process? In which case it may never come to fruition if the 830G moratorium gets passed.
The application has been submitted prior to the effective date of the moratorium. So the commission is obligated to act on it as if the moratorium doesn't exist, because it doesn't yet exist. But should the
Yes.
moratorium bell ring tomorrow,
Right?
this application has been submitted. So by
Okay.
statute, it's not subject to the moratorium.
Um,
We're happy to talk to you tomorrow or
Sure,
anytime
sure.
at the office. You can call us and we can send you, or if you just want to provide us an email address, we can directly send you the link to all the application materials. And if you can answer any questions about the process as we proceed.
I have a quick concern, and I don't mean to interrupt the process here at all, and I, commend all of you for devoting all this time and energy to our town of Fairfield. I appreciate that. I'm a nurse and have been Yale New Haven, not Hartfordville, employee for over 40 years, and my concern is, I live right next door to this 168 project of Christopher Coco and Angie Yarska. There's a lot of stagnant water there. There's parasites there, virology issues going on. I'm just so concerned about what's happening there. The whole neighborhood has been pretty much demolished by these two people in their development. So is there any way, some sort of vehicle by which we could express outside of, say, public hearings about environmental concerns of this nature?
Well, yes, so you and I have spoken many times on, in the past.
Not many, last year. I mean, there's
So, no, I understand, but that's the purpose of the public hearing process, is to put all those issues that are of concern to parties, public, to assert those publicly, so the commission then can weigh all the factors. That's the essential purpose of holding a public hearing.
I don't think anyone would like to live next door to this project.
Right, again, but that's the
So why
public
don't we-
hearing is the opportunity to express that, and unfortunately, there's obviously some confusion as to tonight's proceedings versus the actual public hearing.
People that have viruses and bacteria and infections that no one can cure. And here I'm living, all of us in the neighborhood, people that are on chemotherapy in the neighborhood have to deal with this type of situation.
So I can say,
So we, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So we will find out through the appropriate channels when we should come back to give our public comments.
And I'm happy to communicate that. If you provide any email address, we can directly.
please reach out to the
Oh, I'm
staff.
definitely gonna, I
Feel free to
am.
Call us at our office. That's it. So-
Absolutely. All right.
And I
Thank you for your time.
apologize for the inconvenience. If I had known, I would have brought that up earlier. I just thought I actually thought everybody was here for what we were talking about now, so I apologize.
That's my fault. So I told them all to come.
I apologize to all of us. We're all here.
I apologize to everybody.
You're always welcome.
We're school teachers and nurses in the neighborhood, so we appreciate all this you do for our environment.
Yeah, it's okay, babe. You did a good job. Did the best you could.
So Chris, wants to public comment on the text amendment?
Yes.
Can I come up? Keep it moving?
Sure, go on.
Sure, I'm sorry, but I just, because it's an awkward position, but I think my understanding of case law, I have to put on the record that put on the record regarding the conflict. Because
I get it. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
The people that beat.
As far as I understand, and we can put it on the record.
I want to introduce myself. Yeah,
Really? And you're.
Because the thing I want to make, because we were talking about what happened at the last
Tell you
hearing,
where all this stuff is.
Attorney Rizzio made a presentation. There was a discussion about whether or not the three applications to go forward. We
Lights on the ceiling.
withdrew during that initial presentation, we withdrew the other two and proceeded just on the text amendment application. And so when it got to public comment, it was public comment on just the text amendment application. And then my understanding is Attorney Green represents an LLC where Commissioner Braun, and I respect Commissioner Braun and her desire to be in on the app, but I think I'm required to put on the record that appears to be a conflict.
Well, let's, because I think, like I said, I had thought, that's why I jumped to mind that Mr. Braun had talked last time. And asked, whatever, we'll see. But let's see what public comment goes. Your objection is noted, and I would put it back on rebuttal as well, because I'm gonna ask Attorney Green as well.
May I be heard?
Well, I think we should go to public comments.
Well, I'm being challenged right in public hearing, and I'd like to make a statement.
Okay, go ahead.
When we consider text amendments, we can draft them ourselves, or we can take in an application. It may or may not be associated with a specific proposal for development. We wear our planning hats. We have very broad legislative discretion. This text amendment is not related to any application. There is no application pending right now. And this commission should not even consider that there may or may not be an application pending at some point in any text amendment. It should be done separately. Other towns have separate planning commissions. And if so, the application would be filed with the planning commission. And then somebody could file an application if the text amendment was passed by the planning commission. We have a combined planning and zoning commission, so we do both, and it can be confusing. But I do believe that this commission should not be considering potential applications, because that could sway you for or against something that you shouldn't be swayed on. We are a planning commission, and we should be planning things that are in the best interest of our town for posterity. And it should not relate to any one particular application. That's why I asked the question in the prior one. This could affect more than one parcel. Somebody could form a design commercial district up the Merritt Parkway, and this could have broader impact than just that one parcel. That was not changing it just for that one parcel. That was any design business district anywhere on the Merritt Parkway. And the same thing here. This actually affects every residential district in the entire town.
I understand that. I
There's
understand.
no application pending.
Well, there is
There's
an
a lot of people speaking in favor and against it tonight, I imagine.
There is an application pending. It's a regulation amendment, and we all have an obligation to review that to see if we have conflicts of interest. So
why would there be a conflict of interest on a regulation amendment that affects every
I think
district?
you identified one last time, so we'll see if that conflict no longer exists. Mr. Wendt, did you have something? Okay. Why don't we go to public comments, please? Ma'am, it's your turn.
Hello again. Good evening. I'm Lauren O'Brien, and I'm speaking regarding my opposition to this text amendment. 25 years ago, I moved not to Stamford or Norwalk, but to Fairfield because I wanted to live with less density in a town. On last week's 13-plus-hour Zoom call with the state legislature, a man associated with a planning group stated, "Everybody wants density. Everybody wants it. Density is good." Well, everyone is entitled to their opinion. Everybody doesn't want density. Growth catalyzed by zoning variance requests and approvals have resulted in additional homes where there were once side lawns on my street. And while that growth is a 50% increase in density, it is far more organic than the proposed exponential density growth of this text amendment. Despite developers chomping at the bit to build in Fairfield, we are not obligated to increase density to fulfill their business goals. Towns do not have to become cities. The current process is flawed. There are currently too many forces all vying to build out town density all at the same time. There are already just too many different and simultaneous projects and forces trying to increase density to ever hope to achieve a good outcome for our town. Of great concern is not only the mass density ready to be off and running like racehorses in a starting grid, But much of the proposed changes to facilitate this mass amount of construction wants to remove residents' input and input from local boards, as does this text amendment. You know, as we've talked about before, residents know their area best. They often flag public health and safety and environmental concern that the town misses or doesn't even research, especially given the current onslaught of applications before the town. I don't envy you guys. You signed up for once a month, twice a month, you're meeting every week. It's insane, the amount of work that is before the commission. And I appreciate what you do. As we've seen time again, the system of checks and balances to review zoning matters is not perfect. The process is driven by many stakeholders, developers, attorneys, experts hired by residents and applicants, the residents themselves, and town departments. But even with all those people involved, most often problems are uncovered by the residents, especially with increased density and 8-30G applications. While it should not be, is unfairly burdened and cost falls to the residents to prevent unsafe density and bad environmental outcomes. The process is flawed. This text amendment was put forth by a builder. I understand that it was initially associated with a specific project for which that application has now been withdrawn at this time. So now there's no timetable, and we should take up time to study this because now the proposed changes will affect all of Fairfield, every zone. But it won't affect all areas of Fairfield equally. It's a nice gift to the builders, clearly not the residents and certainly not the homeowners. The East End and those on sewer will bear the brunt of this, but not all equally. It will allow greater density than our zoning regulations currently allow. Furthermore, all this increase in density will not address our need for affordable housing, a huge pressing need for the town, but will only make it harder to achieve our next moratorium in another 4 years. Of late, it often feels like the zoning staff and our chair of the zoning, Mr. Noonan, keep moving the goalposts further to get mass density floodgates opened wide as soon as possible. That will make Fairfield into a dense city. Some areas of town more so than others. One example is the POCD being pushed forward. And I mentioned the POCD and 8-30G in this text amendment because they are irrefutably connected. You can't separate one with the other from the others, which is why it's so difficult. But I'll try and stay focused. You know, we have till November 2026 to figure out the POCD, which will vastly impact our town. And I hope we take all the time we need to do it properly. Very concerning recently was a statement I heard at the POCD meeting that private development is moving faster than we are by Mr. Wen. Yep. So private developers moving faster than we are. Do developers now work directly with the zoning staff to set the timetable for our town's planning? I understood zoning staff works in the best interest of the town and it reports to the zoning commissioners and the first selectman, not the developers. Funneling all this density at a cost of, for sewer alone, 20+ million, all to the east side of town is not planning, it's dumping. Making certain areas of town the sacrificial lamb none more so than the east side. I'm trying to skip through and move this along. Okay, major change townwide is not going to affect all of town as much as it will the east side that has the greater propensity of the A, B, and C zones. If passed, Fairfield will have a before and after side of town, exactly like Stamford. And I personally don't want that. Zones AA and AAA will not feel any impact unless a builder acquires between 10 and 30 contiguous acres. It's time to balance the equation. The areas that are already the densest in town should not be further burdened. This requires planning. The likelihood of any effect, let alone significant density increase in AA and AAA zones will be 0 to none. I grant you that some organic growth into residential from commercial areas is unavoidable, just as dropping a petal into a pond ripples and grows in concentric circles. Funneling the majority or nearly all density to the east side of town is this text amendment and the draft POCD as written, not yet final, despite being referenced by builders in current applications. This amendment will be like dropping a boulder into a wading pool. Currently, in addition to the other approved development construction, Fairfield has in the works, over 1,000 affordable units? That's just 8-30G, the effects of which the traffic and other conditions have yet to be felt because these buildings, these units are approved but not yet built, or they're built but not yet occupied. And as you painfully know, many more applications are in the process with zoning. We are currently experiencing an onslaught of applications. And even more expected that Fairfield has qualified and applied for the 8-30G moratorium to get that 4-year pause. Note of paramount importance is that moratorium because it's based on what we have achieved progress-wise with the town's affordable units. And those units directly affect density. This very moratorium is part of the checks and balances that are drafted into law to guide our density growth. We cannot keep building and building and building without a cohesive plan and a pause to assess and study to protect the town and its residents. Again, the increased affordable units of 8-30G and density in all areas in the POCD and this text amendment are unrefutably connected. That totality of all independent, concurrent, and simultaneous building must be acknowledged and appropriately planned for. This text amendment will result in development, the majority of which will be funneled to the sewer-supported areas of town, the east side. All of this building approved and happening at once will 100% cause problems yet to be determined or realized that will need to be addressed and corrected. You know, it brings to mind Elon Musk recently said, all these regulations, just let us do it. If we make a mistake, fine us. Well, I think Fairfield's better than that. You know, it's going to be addressed and corrected, but at what cost? This is not responsible development. Here's why. Because the standard metrics to measure appropriate growth cannot be applied while approving so much development simultaneously. Fairfield is currently overburdened with a huge number of approved and pending applications to expand density, while reducing town residents' ability to provide public comment at hearings or possibly eliminating in the future review by local zoning boards to be heard. This is all a bad idea. I implore you, our TPZ commissioners that we have elected, to deny and not slam this through. Do not continue to overburden your commission by trying to decide too much all at once, but rather allow time for proper and thorough review to analyze and actually plan in the best interest of all Fairfield residents and homeowners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other members of the public? Whoever wants to come up. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission staff. Once again, my name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. It's my pleasure to appear before you again this evening. And with me tonight is Dr. Thomas Braun. So before I begin, when I had some introductory remarks, and when Dr. Braun and I met before the hearing, he had many of the same remarks, and I said that I thought I'd give him his 15 minutes of fame here just to start off.
Just,
We're gonna
5
be-
minutes,
We're
I'll
gonna be
take 5.
brief.
No, that's okay. Just to be,
We're gonna be brief.
Mike,
use the mic, which is fair. Attorney Green, who do you represent?
I represent, I believe I represented, the last time I appeared, I indicated that I represent Stilson LLC, who owns property directly across the street from a property that is owned by the applicant here.
I believe the member is the good doctor here.
I believe that Dr. Brown is a member.
I thought I just, my own recollection, it was 2 months ago. I thought I was going crazy. But I thought there was a connection, so thank you for that. Proceed as you wish.
I've,
You can put your microphone kind of up by your chin
this
area.
is Thomas Braun, 200 Lakeside Drive, Fairfield, and I've engaged Mr. Green tonight to help me, assist me with this matter and my opposition to this. Okay, I'd like to read two short passages from the governing law of this commission from the Connecticut General Statutes. Chapter 124, Section 82A. Such regulations shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan, and in adopting such regulations, the commission shall consider the plan of conservation and development prepared under Section 823. Such regulations shall be designed to lessen congestion of the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, flood, and other dangers, to promote health and general welfare, to provide adequate light and air, to prevent overcrowding of the land, to avoid undue concentration of population.
Yeah, she texted me. Thank
And
you.
to facilitate adequate provision for transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public requirements. Such regulations shall be made with reasonable consideration as to the character of the district and its peculiar suitability for particular uses, and with a view to conserving the value of buildings and encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout such municipality. That's the charge from the state to this commission. As a second shorter passage, chapter 124, section 8.3b. Such regulations and boundaries shall be established, changed, or repealed only by a majority vote of all members of the zoning commission, except as otherwise provided in this chapter. In making its decision, the commission shall take into consideration the plan of conservation and development prepared to pursuant Section 823, and shall state on the records its findings on consistency of the proposed establishment, change, or repeal of such regulations and boundaries with such a plan. We have a POCD currently in effect that runs for another 2 years. All your decisions should be working with the framework set up by that POCD. Any proposed POCD is just ephemeral and is not real at this point. Now, I've heard nothing at this hearing, which started last month, about the consistency of this proposed amendment with the existing POCD, which is required by state law. Now, we should follow the law. The proposed changes to the Fairfield zoning regulations will not comply with any of those above requirements of zoning. The proposed changes will greatly increase density and put added strain on our schools, municipal services like fire, police, and public works, sewers, increased traffic, and general congestion. Now, literally thousands of additional housing units could be added to the housing stock in Fairfield to the detriment of all of us. There has been much discussion about the shortage of middle housing. These changes will not help. They will not produce affordable housing for municipal workers, teachers, or our children. The only beneficiaries of these changes will be the property developers who can cram more houses onto less land and make more money. Nowhere in the statutes does it state that the purpose of zoning is to maximize the potential profit from each piece of property. If citizens of good faith believe changes are needed, and I'm sure some are needed, we have a planning process in place, the 10-year plan of conservation and development, which is also mandated by state law. Proposals should be submitted to the POCD committee, which I believe is a committee of the whole of the Conservation Commission in Fairfield, and debated in a non-rushed atmosphere with input from town departments and other interested parties. Changes should be proposed and voted as part of the 10-year planning process. They shouldn't be done on a piecemeal basis. It makes no sense to make multiple changes to the regulations without looking at the big picture. These proposals are being presented as minor changes, a little nip and a little tuck. They are not. They're very big changes. What we do now will affect us for the next 100 years and will be our children's problems. With the current market prices of new homes, there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars of additional housing that can be built with these changes. That's quite a bit of money. With money like that at stake, developers have no limit to what they will spend on legal fees to push projects through. There is no way for the average citizen to compete. I ask the commission to please support the voters and citizens of Fairfield in opposing these far-reaching changes in regulations. What is the big rush to make the changes? Where's the fire? There's absolutely no hurry. I urge the commission, do not approve these or other similar far-reaching amendments. Now, there is a reasonable solution, and that is reject this proposed change and similar ones and invite the applicant to submit to the POCD process for review. This is also encouraged and mandated by state law. Anyone who applies for a project or owns property as a citizen of the town can have input in the POCD process. Don't rush this. Please let the planning process work. Thank you.
So as I had indicated, it is our hope and intention to close the public hearing this evening on this. And I think Attorney Russo is giving me the thumbs up. He's dedicated to that as well. So I'm not going to take a long time. But the problem is we have not taken a long time on this application. Once again, you have a situation where you have an applicant, and while the applicant has admittedly withdrawn their special permit or site plan review, the applicant comes forward with a text amendment that has broad and far-reaching consequences in the town of Fairfield. It is applicable to most zones in the town of Fairfield. And yet the applicant has not begun to provide this commission with what the citizens of Fairfield would expect this commission to have before it, before adopting a text amendment with such broad implications. I mean, I sat down just, I was struck by the sort of the lack of depth of the presentation by the applicant, but looking at the text amendments, for example, the 10.6, where, and again, I understand there are limitations on where these developments may be placed, and it has to be a main artery and that sort of thing in terms of its location. But just on the face of it, if you look at 10.6, instead of, for example, in a AAA zone, having a density of 0.5 units per acre and a minimum lot size of 30 acres, in that case, you would have obviously potentially 60 units on that property in a AAA zone. With this amendment, you would have 432 units. In the AA zone, with and understandably, you have to have 10 acres of land, and it has to be, again, located as the regulation requires, but the density goes from 1 unit per acre, and based on the formula advanced by the applicant, it would advance to 142 units on that 10-acre property. In the R3 zone, it would go from 16 units to 71 units. In the R2 zone, from 9 units potentially to 25 units. In the A zone, from 6.9 to 11, and in B and C, it would stay relatively the same, 10 or 11. But there has been no analysis, and I know that Dr. Braun just went through some of the considerations for this commission in adopting zoning regulations. None of that's been provided. The applicant, while identifying the limitation on where DRDs can be established, didn't, for example, provide a map in the town as to where DRDs could realistically be sited, or some statistic on what we're looking at as a town in terms of the number of potential DRDs. Traffic. What is as from a planning perspective, environmental, traffic, all the things that this commission has to think about under section 8-2. Where is even the baseline analysis that the planning process would involve before you adopt this at the request of one lot owner concerned with his own lot. Where is the broad analysis that is expected? And honestly, when this commission, when this commission initiates text amendments, you spend a great deal of time, and a lot of time is spent by staff and town departments on understanding what the impacts are. And here you have an applicant who's basically just eager to get their site developed that comes in with this just huge, broad, and far-reaching text amendment and asks you to adopt it without beginning to provide the kind of foundation and basis for you to exercise the jurisdiction vested in you under 8-2. So
Remind me though, as far as the amendment, should it be adopted in some respect? They come to us with some kind of, with either a special exception or special permit application. It's not necessarily an as of right administrative review.
but it opens the door to all of that. So yes, you are right. There are other safeguards in the pipeline. But right at the moment, I'm not sure that this commission needs extra business this week. But having said that, it opens that pipeline. And I'm just suggesting that before you do that, and before you start applying the special permit standards from a planning perspective,
I got your point. I
Yeah.
guess the counter to that is just simply,
Look,
it's not as if it's a carte blanche, go ahead. We still have the discretion to review the
and
sites.
that's a very fair footnote that
Yeah.
you're putting into this argument.
Thank
So,
you.
yes, absolutely. So look, this, again, the factors are,
Footnote, sorry, just caught my attention.
the factors are, obviously, this commission has to be concerned with the uniformity rule. You have to be concerned with the conformance with the comprehensive plan. You have to be concerned with public health, safety, and welfare. Now, is it even possible to put 432 units anywhere in the AAA zone as the town system is presently configured? I don't think so.
Unless they're all, so what's the alternative, the public sewer? Septic, yeah, unless they're all septic.
Yeah, and that's a heavy lift. So that's not even, but that hasn't even been accounted for by the applicant. That hasn't even been analyzed. Consistency with the plan of conservation and development, again, environmental and infrastructural impact, and sort of public notice, hearing and notice requirements that sort of go with this. So that when these members of the public show up and they're kind of interested in what's going on and they're sort of lost in the process, there's got to be a little bit more out there for everybody to think about. This, let me just throw it out. This regulation as it presently exists, but also as it's proposed to be amended, really runs into trouble with the uniformity requirements under the law, and the town attorney can speak to you about that, but I'll throw that log on the fire, meaning properties in the same zones get treated differently, for example, with setbacks. Right now, as it is written, and it's problematical, you get a setback requirement, and it says the setback requirement from any street or property line shall be those which existed in the prior zoning classification of the property, or 30 feet, whichever is greater. So what that means is that DRDs in different zones, even though they're called a DRD, depending on where your DRD gets landed, you get a different setback potentially. So that's a uniformity problem that exists in the present regulation that needs to be thought about. But this regulation, as it's proposed to be amended, it actually exacerbates the uniformity issue. So look, I could go on for quite a bit on this, but I'm just going to say, and I'm not saying this to be, I urge the commission to deny this, and I don't think that the amendment, with all due respect to the commission, to the applicant, and all involved, I don't think that this would withstand judicial scrutiny if it was adopted as it is proposed. And I say that with all due respect to all involved. And I don't mean to be arrogant or bold or anything, but there's a lot of problems here. But most significantly, sort of the machinery that the applicant set in motion here, there's just no basis for it. So I think, is this a discussion to be had down the line as we grapple with these development issues in town? Absolutely. But we're not there yet in terms of how this application's been presented and the information before the commission. I'm not going to take up any more time. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, Alexis Harrison. Sorry, I was late to the meeting. I apologize. I had a family matter to attend to tonight. I agree largely with Dr. Braun and Attorney Green. You know, we have not really received the diligence on this amendment that we should be given. I mean, I think I did back of the napkin math. I think in what AAA zone, it would, I think it could have us build, several hundred units, right, per acre. Is that right? Or anyway, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot, on infrastructure, environment, traffic. We don't know what the implications are. I definitely want to explore this. It's great that the developer has proposed it, but I don't feel any rush to pass this right now. We have a lot going on relative to a lot of 830G developments. I think we have about between 800 and 1,000 units that have been passed, but yet not built. We don't even know those implications. So we have a lot going on, as town. I think just to be careful planners, we need to do our due diligence and move a little slower on this. We are under no rush. We have the discretion. We're wearing our legislative hats here. I will get to a question. I apologize for being long-winded. I just want to understand this, because it's been a while since we've reviewed this application. Would we be giving up the public hearings if this was passed as it is now? Would this be just passed in the office without any, diligence by this commission?
Oh, I'd asked that question. I believe it would go through a special permit or a special exception.
Or a zone change.
A zone change. Yeah, excuse me. You're right.
Okay.
Subdivision.
So the answer would be what? We still have a lot of discretion or what?
Yes.
I'm just not clear.
No, we would. I mean, this is time, this is public comment. Ask your questions to Attorney Green. We're not in.
Yeah, that was my question to whomever wants to answer it.
As I understand it, the text, if the commission were to adopt what is proposed, the text of the amendment would be, if it changed as proposed, and then at that point, the applicant would potentially come in with a map amendment to establish a DRD wherever any applicant has property, and these changes in the metrics would apply to that map amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further for Attorney Green?
Yeah, I just got some general questions, and because I'm extremely frustrated by a lot of these comments from the public, from you, saying we need a plan. But it's not acknowledged that 830Gs are shoved down our throat and will be shoved down the throat across the street because we have failed to plan. So this attempt to make an incremental change is a step in the right direction. So I'm getting contradictions. So my question is, what is your suggestion for planning specific to offer a compromise to, we need housing? And despite what was said incorrectly, the 2016 plan says we need housing. It says we need housing, we need density. What is your specific suggestion? Because I'm hearing no, I'm hearing a rejection of any change. So what is your specific suggestion?
Here's what I'm saying. First of all, I recognize that this commission is like the winner of the pie eating contest, whose prize is more pie week after week. I'm getting it. I understand you are a line of applications under 8-30G, and I appreciate the time, effort, and sort of the consequence you all, or the circumstance you all find yourself in. And I understand your frustration. The answer is, I view this as a step, but I don't view this as a step in the right direction. And you can't assess that this is a step in the right direction based on the information you have. So I think, and I think look, a lot of larger municipalities have a separate planning commission and a separate zoning commission. And that is because of exactly what we're seeing in Fairfield, where sort of the planning function is gigantic. And right now the line on zoning function is out the door. So I honestly think if you're asking my opinion, I think maybe the town needs to retain outside planning consultants on sort of a larger plan. And maybe that should be something in the budget to sort of develop this plan that the public is asking for. And I understand that's in reaction to individual developments, case by case, but it is apparent that we are at a tipping point in this town. And I appreciate the fact that you meet week after week after week, but there's got to be a larger planning function. And I just, again, don't view this as you can't assess whether this is in the right direction.
Let me jump in, just.
More is not better.
Let me just jump in. If we have specific questions on the opposition, I would ask that because we got 15 minutes left. And I do believe we really need to finish this hearing tonight, considering that Attorney Green is basically done with his. I don't think there's any other public, but I will ask that. So we can save this for, I think, our executive session. Any further questions specifically on the opposition? Attorney Green, thank you. Dr. Vaughn, thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you, members of the commission, for listening.
Thank you, Doctor. Hold on. Any other member of the public wish to be heard on this application? You already know the answer. Anybody joining us remotely or by phone that wish to be heard in this application? And this application being application of Shapiro Commons LLC to amend section 10, section 10.6, 10.10, 10.12, etc. If you're joining by phone, please press *6. All right, not hearing anything, I'll close the public comment portion of the application. We'll turn it to rebuttal with if I ask you again, just go through the process, because I think I said it wrong. If we were to approve this, what further discretion do we have for people setting up a development under these new regulations?
So what's the application process after this?
What would happen?
Yeah, and I think that is a crucial point with this. An applicant would have to apply for a zone change to a designed residence district where you act in your legislative discretion, which is your greatest amount of discretion. That is a key part of this. If somebody comes and manages to find a 50-acre property in the AAA zone that is connected to sewers, because that's a requirement now of the regulations that it has to be connected to sewers, and that it's on a collector road, you could tell them to pound sand because you just don't agree with locating the DRD there. That is in your discretion. So I think there's a big step that's being overlooked.
And if it's in that type, if we already have that type of zone for whatever reason, what's the next step?
After that, then there's special permit, which you have your heightened standards. And I was actually going to get into that because it goes to a comment that Commissioner Randolph made at the last hearing. There are specific special permit standards just for designed residence districts. So not just your general special permit standards, you have a whole section regarding, as Commissioner Randolph was concerned with at the last hearing, landscaping. Because there was a lot of discussion about landscaping and what would be provided. There was a discussion between, I think, Commissioner Randolph and Chairman Noonan about that, and that it would be more appropriate for the special permit stage. But just so you know, when you get to that stage, there's an extra layer of review for landscaping, for lighting. There's a lot of discretion there as well. So there's a two-step process. And because I've seen Attorney Green present many times. I've learned a lot from Attorney Green. And there is this comment with regulation amendments. Well, let's look at every possible permutation and how things can happen. I think Attorney Rizzio spoke to this. By the way, the lack of depth comment was directed to Attorney Rizzio, not me, because I didn't do the. But he did, what Attorney Rizzio said is the tough part, even if you did an analysis, somebody could join lots together. You know, you could look at lots that exist now. Well, somebody could go and they could join lots together. But the benefit the commission has from this structure is you have to come in for a zone change amendment. And so, for example, if you came in for a property that was by Stilson Road and you went for a DRD, you would submit information on traffic. You would submit information on the environmentals, inland wetlands, on the landscaping, all those things, and you would consider it. And you may look at it and you'd say, yes, this is a good spot for a DRD. No, this isn't a good spot. But there you're dealing with something specific and you can provide that information. I think an overarching, it's for the whole town and possible permutations is too ambitious. What I think this commission has done a lot of legwork on is identify that there's a housing need and considering ways such as middle housing to address it. And there are already in the regulations limiting factors, again, the collector road, the requirements for sewer. But again, there's also this next step where you will consider, should we change the zone of this property to a DRD?
Which would be subject potentially if there was a petition to supermajority. Is that the same map?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Could you?
Remember, if enough neighbors sign a petition opposing the map change, you go from a simple majority 4 out of 7 to a supermajority. I think we see that in Post Road right now. Yeah.
Yes. So there's that as well. Just to go through some of the comments. One, this does not exempt from inclusionary zoning. So if you came in, even if the moratorium's approved, that has nothing to do with it. Your regulations require 10%. Any development that came in would require 10% affordable. The conversation about the uniformity clause, I think that is not what the uniformity clause is. The uniformity clause, you have different setbacks from different zones already, right? I mean, each zone doesn't have the same exact setback. You have set forward different standards for each zone. What the uniformity clause talks about is you can't have zone A side setback and say it could be 5 or it could be 10. And then it's just left up to your discretion when somebody comes over and say, well, on this one, we want a 10-foot side back, or on this one, we want a 5-foot side back. There has to be a person applying has to be able to know what standards apply to them. So I mean, this specifically lays out the standards about setback. It's clear. I don't think the uniformity clause has any implication in this. Commissioner Randolph in his comments to Attorney Green said a lot of what I was going to say, and I think it's very important in that this allows this commission for developments of greater density. I think, there was a comment from a member of the public that 830G and the regulations all kind of work together, and it's kind of, no, they're distinct, right? The 830G does not have to follow your regulations. I think the nice thing about this amendment, if I could predict something with this amendment, is that it may bring in 830G developments into the regulations. I could certainly see a situation where there's been a lot of 830G developments that have been approved. Not all of them have been built. And some of them are getting close to their time period where they have to go and get built. I could certainly see developments looking at this revised regulation saying, all right, well, I'm going to have to reduce my density. But this seems like a viable project for what I'm looking to do. And they could reduce their density and come in under this regulation. So I actually think this is a tremendous opportunity to bring in some sites for under this regulation. But the main thing I want to go over, because Commissioner Harrison raised this when she was talking with Attorney Rizzio, and I think it's important because she made the comment regarding, Ray was talking about the draft POCD, and that obviously hasn't been approved. But, so I want to make clear for the record that we believe this conforms to your current POCD and other documents that are part of your comprehensive zoning plan. The case law talks about comprehensive zoning plan. It's not just POCD. It's not just your regulations. There are other documents that come into your comprehensive zoning plan, including the affordable housing plan that was approved. So I just want to run through the portions of the POCD that I think this falls in line with, that the POCD that's approved now. That Commissioner Randolph mentioned, the 2016 POCD. In section Roman numeral 3.3, it lays out housing, and it talks about the goals that this commission must seek. We must seek goals that will provide housing opportunities to people of all ages, creeds, races, incomes, and physical disabilities, diversification of housing accommodations for the many individual desires of our population, residential development on a density and cluster framework compatible with natural environmental limitations and opportunities, and specifically utilization of designed residence district as a transition from commercial uses to single-family residential use. And there are specific proposed regulations here that deal with just that, particularly the change to the setback regulation, which talks about developments which abut a designed business district, and as well as coverage in bulk, which speaks to, again, lots that abut the designed business district, specifically fulfilling this goal of creating a transition from a DBD, a commercial district, to single-family residential use. So that's a direct line, I think, to the current POCD. And then the town recognizes the obligation to provide affordable housing and should continue to pursue appropriate options to supply affordable housing in all areas of town. Again, the inclusionary requirement remains. This will continue to create affordable housing. The moratorium is only for so long. The obligation does not end once the moratorium hits. And I think these amendments will spur the creation of more affordable units into the future. The other current document I'd reference is the Affordable Housing Plan, which I certainly think makes up part of your comprehensive zoning plan. They talked about specifically in one of their strategies, review, amend the design residence district zone regulations. And they state there are some provisions in the DRD regulations which may inhibit its potential to provide housing options in general and affordable housing in particular. And they talked about possible options for the designed residence district. One of those points being increasing the maximum density limitation in some or all areas. And then another was revisit other DRD provisions, which included eliminating the limitation of no more than 4 units in one building, modifying some building coverage limitations, and modifying some building floor area limitations, which is exactly what we're proposing with this regulation amendment. So your regulations for the affordable housing plan, that's something that you've referred to previously. So I think these are approved, in place zoning documents that I think you can rely on. I think it's also important to talk about the draft POCD because we are obviously at the final hour of this current POCD, and you want to make sure that it's in line with that. You're not just approving something and then the next POCD is, it's just completely out of line with.
Let's just leave it as, your point's fine, just, it's a draft. So
It's a draft, but I don't think, even though it's not approved, I don't think the commission has to act like the information that's been received about that document doesn't exist. So the information that's received about mental housing.
And why everybody's informally referencing it and such, but we have to go by the current POCD at this point. So.
Right, and so I'm just, and so I think we're in conformity with that, but more importantly, we're in conformity with your current POCD and your current affordable housing plan. So with that, I think I've covered everything, and happy to answer any further questions on this.
Yeah, Attorney Russo, did you submit a map of where these different zones would be? I saw obviously the sheet, but is there like a map that you could provide? I'm not sure if I saw that in your packet.
Well, again, what we're proposing here is to return to the DRD regulations that.
No, I understand that, but is there a map?
Yeah, but the DRD regulations apply throughout the town, so
No, I understand that. AAA, AA, R3, I got that, but
What do you look, like a map for what this could apply for?
yeah, where they would be applicable to, because I understand it's townwide, but it would just,
Well, I think that's how.
again, as,
I think the point is, it applies, I mean, kind of throughout the town where you have a certain amount of land per acre, I mean, per
Right.
zone.
yeah,
So-
right.
and there's the collector roads,
So a map is not possible or would not show anything? I mean, I'm just curious.
I don't know, understand what the map would show. I mean, there's the collector roads, which limits where this could go.
Like it would impact, this area of town, this area of town, this area of town. I mean, I know it's spread out, but I was just curious if there was anything, I guess, more explicit visually, but if not, no problem. Thank you.
I think the collector map would maybe be the one that would show you, which I have and is part of your zoning document. But I mean,
I think we've been told that
throughout
that
the
there are
town.
so many lot sizes or, lots that would, I don't know, conform to this. I don't know. I was just curious. Okay.
Well, I mean, we go by sewer and collectors, so I
Okay.
think we have those maps and probably those are probably the
Yeah,
best way.
and maybe it doesn't really matter, so.
Well,
Sure.
yeah, and again, and I think that Commissioner Harrison, I think that's what Ray was trying to get to at the last meeting is, yes, there is this restriction about connectivity to sewers. Now, we can't predict in 2-3 years necessarily where the sewers might be extended to. Maybe somebody combines properties and is able to extend sewer somewhere. So I could show you a map, like let's say there was a map that showed you where the current sewer line is. But in 2-3 years, that might no longer apply. But the important thing again, I think, is there's a zone change application next. So that is where this commission, working in its legislative discretion, can look, traffic, collector road, sewers, all those things, and judge all those things and determine if it's appropriate or not.
Thank you.
Final questions for Attorney Russo? Not hearing anything, I'll close the rebuttal and close the application, yeah. Close this application. Attorney Russo,
Thank you,
Attorney
Chair.
Green, members of
Thank
the public, thank you.
Appreciate it as always.
Staff, thank you. Commission, thank you. We are adjourned. You see, we're not doing anything tonight. You want to talk? All right.
He's been told it's not done yet.